Good evening and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the United Conservative Party debate coverage that True North is launching. As you know, True North is really here to talk about the issues that matter to Canadians, the issues that matter to people voting in leadership races for Conservative parties, whether it's the Conservative Party of Canada or the United Conservative Party of Alberta. So we are very pleased, thrilled, in fact, I can say, to deliver live debate coverage for you this evening. We'll have some analysis, commentary leading into the debate. We'll have the debate itself on this stream, so you don't need to go anywhere else. And then we'll pick back up on the other end of it for the debate scrums and also for some post-debate analysis. And of course, we're going to be taking your thoughts, your comments throughout this as well. If you have questions, leave them in the comment section. If you have thoughts, leave them there. One of my colleagues, who you will know well from True North by now, Elie Cantin-Nantel, will be mining for the best comments you have to offer, and we'll be breaking them down here and really talking about what the people are saying about this debate, people that are voting in the UCP leadership race, and also people outside of that who might not be members of the UCP, but are nonetheless affected by whoever is going to be the ultimate winner of this race. So we've got a number of candidates debating here. Leela here, Brian Jean, Todd Lowen, Rajan Sani, Rebecca Schultz, Danielle Smith, and Travis Taves. These are the 7 candidates in the UCP leadership race. And I just want to give a little bit of the top line details here so you know the context of this. This debate is being moderated by a former Calgary City Councillor, Jeff Davison, who is the CEO of the Prostate Cancer Centre. So hopefully this debate will be more pleasant than a prostate exam in any event. It's being hosted at the Halo Air Ambulance Hangar in Medicine Hat, which is itself a bit of an interesting choice here. 2 debates sanctioned by the UCP, this one in Medicine Hat and another in Edmonton, none in Calgary, which is the province's biggest city, at least none officially. The debate format hasn't been published, but as I understand from talking to a few sources, it's going to be very focused on interaction. Candidates are going to have a fair bit of time to do one-on-one, which is often a format that necessitates jumping on the front runner. And as we've seen in some recent polls this week, and we'll talk about very shortly, the front runner seems to be Danielle Smith, and not far from behind her, Brian Jean. Although anything can happen, it's still early days in this contest. I want to bring in one of my colleagues at True North. You may not see in front of the camera all that much. He keeps things running behind the scenes, but is nonetheless a critical part in the cog of True North and is himself an Alberta politico. He's been very active in conservative politics and Canadian politics. William McBeath joins me now. William, first off, thanks for being here. I know that we just foisted a camera in your face and said you're going to talk in this, but it's good to have you nonetheless.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here tonight.
Let's just first off talk about the makeup of this. This is a new party. This is the second time the UCP has ever been through a leadership race. And I think Jason Kenney, who came in several years ago as being this grand unifier, has gone out in a rather unceremonious manner. But what would you say has really been the theme of this race?
I mean, I think the context of how Premier Kenney relinquished the leadership, not entirely voluntarily. He received a passing score, but not a very high one in his leadership review. I think you're now seeing, does the party want to walk in a very different direction? Does it want to choose someone who was not associated with it from when Jason Kenney was premier? Or does it want, to retain more of what it was over the past few years with some tweaks and modifications? For some people, maybe the issue was Premier Kenney himself rather than the United Conservative government. And for a lot of people, though, and possibly a majority based on how the polling has gone so far, they want to see real change, absolute change in how the government of Alberta operates, what its priorities are, how it handles major issues like COVID-19, how it deals with Ottawa and federal-provincial relations. And for that, you've got 2 candidates, I think, Brian Jean and Danielle Smith, who represent more of the big change side of this leadership race.
Jason Kenney's position has been, and he said this in interviews I've done with him as well as elsewhere, that it was really COVID that was his unraveling. It was COVID and his government's response to COVID that resulted in all of the things that happened that led to this race. We look at the themes for tonight's debate. I'll share them again: leadership and unity, healthcare, the economy, and the environment. I mean, candidates can't just hide behind I wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have done this lockdown. I wouldn't have done this vaccine passport. They have to have something else to offer here.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and I would say I think Premier Kenny may be a little bit looking at why he suffered a defeat in that leadership review, or if not an actual defeat, a moral one, a little bit differently. If you look next door to Alberta, we have the province of Saskatchewan, led by a conservative Premier Scott Moe. They followed quite a similar path to Alberta, but he's still premier. He hasn't been ousted by his party and his caucus or by Saskatchewanians at large, whereas Jason Kenney was. So to say it was all about COVID and the handling of COVID, I think might be a little bit not the full story when it comes to Jason Kenney. In terms of the issues, though, for Alberta, I think there is a lot of unhappiness in Alberta with the relationship with the federal government. You've got Justin Trudeau, who is widely seen as hostile towards Alberta and its economic interests, not approving pipelines, not being a champion of our Alberta's oil and gas sector, taking pot shots at legitimate businesses who are trying to grow the economy at the same time, deal with stringent environmental standards. I think what Albertans are looking for is someone who's going to be a louder voice in terms of federal and provincial relations, which is why you're seeing some success, I think, from candidates like Danielle Smith, who have been absolutely right out there saying the situation is unacceptable. And in fact, we may not even enforce federal laws in Alberta if they're to the detriment of the province.
We know that being a front runner is obviously great when you want to portray momentum and energy and scare other people out of the race and fundraise. But on a debate stage, being a front runner is a fair bit of a liability. We've seen in the last few weeks the media really start to go after Danielle Smith, I'd say fairly aggressively. And whether it's fairly or unfairly, people can decide for themselves. Are you expecting to see that in the debate tonight, that everyone is basically piling on her?
Yes, to be honest, I'm actually expecting it to be fairly much a Danielle Smith pylon. If you look at who's running in this leadership race, there are 7 candidates, but I would say there are 2 groups. There are the quote-unquote front runners. Those would be Danielle Smith, Brian Jean, and former Finance Minister Travis Tate. And then you've got a group of other candidates who don't have a lot of name recognition or public profile, who I think are probably going to hope to use this debate to get a little bit more profile, to get some energy for their campaigns. But certainly amongst Brian Jean and Travis Tate, I think you will see fairly aggressive postures towards Danielle Smith to try and blunt some of that perceived momentum. And of course, the membership sales cutoff is not that far away. It's just about 2 weeks and a couple days from now. And if that's the case, there isn't that much more time for, regardless if you're a front runner or one of the others in this race, you're going to have to start to make real progress selling memberships if you have a hope of winning when the vote happens in October.
Yeah, very well said. The debate is set to begin in just over 15 minutes' time. I want to take this opportunity to give a bit of the lay of the land for our coverage this evening. We are going to have the debate carried live on this stream, on this feed, starting in 15 minutes' time. And also, we have our own Alberta correspondent who was on my show a couple of weeks ago, is a new addition to the team, but a tremendously experienced and capable reporter. That is Rachel Emmanuel, and we'll have updates from her very shortly. And she's on the ground keeping us apprised of what's happening. I also want to bring in another colleague, Elie Cantin-Nantel, who's been monitoring the social media desk, which is a name I've just given for whatever desk he's working from now, but it's more of a function than a physical place. Elie, what are people saying online first and foremost? Are they expressing a preference in what you're seeing about which candidate, or is it a bit of a mixed bag?
Well, Andrew, it would depend really where you look. So I looked at Twitter, for example, and it's mostly a bunch of left-wingers being like, oh, I can't wait to see what new conspiracy theory Danielle Smith comes out with today. They're not a fan of Danielle Smith, clearly. There's people sharing this old article where she apparently was talking about how smoking isn't as bad as they say. So on that end, there's not a lot of useful information. In our stream, a couple of our viewers have shared different views. Donna Slatter simply said that Danielle Smith will win, versus some other ones like Edwin Dotzel says that some of these candidates are ridiculous. Rebecca Schultz, number 1. We have some others that are asking questions. Diane asks a pretty good question, in my opinion, and it's she says, I've yet to hear where any of the candidates' positions are on the current and future Alberta school curriculums, especially their views on sexual education in the elementary schools and beyond. Sorry, and this is a pretty relevant issue. We're seeing it especially in the United States, and we saw it throughout the months of June. Really, that the parents are getting increasingly concerned as there's more and more ideology, gender ideology, critical race theory being pushed in elementary schools. We see it almost every day. There's this account called Libs of TikTok, and they basically just go and they find TikToks that teachers make, and some of the stuff that these teachers do is simply outrageous. So definitely a good point there. And unlike other provinces like Ontario or in the East, where you have a strong amount of liberals to push back, Alberta is fairly conservative, so they have the levy, they have the room to put in place school curriculums that are fairly conservative without getting widespread backlash the way Ontario did. Somebody else bring up, Shannon says that the imprisoners of pastors was a huge mistake, and I think this too. When you look at this race and the anger, as you and William were talking about earlier with Jason Kenney and COVID, sure, it wasn't the only thing that led to his downfall, but it was a pretty major one. I remember being in Alberta just after Pastor James Coates had been arrested, and just in the little area I was living, it was just a couple of townhouses. There were people that had signs in the window saying "Free Pastor James." Like this really impacted Christians. I remember going to church, and I went to different churches, and they were all praying. Like it really impacted Alberta's religious community to see these pastors arrested, and we didn't see that in other parts of the country. So I think that too is something that it's worth mentioning. That's really it on my end for now. More people pouring in, people saying they like Todd Lowen, and people saying they want Notley to resign. So yeah, I guess a mixed bag, as you say, people voicing their opinions, and then the lefties on Twitter not liking Danielle Smith, similar to how they dislike Pierre Poilievre.
Thank you, Elie. We'll check back in with you in just a few moments' time. Appreciate your update there. Let me go to you on that, William, because I think both of those things that Elie picked out are really important battles in the conservative movement. And I think both of them at their core touch on social conservatism, which I know is an issue that's always a balancing act in the federal Conservative Party. And in Alberta, I mean, there's a fair bit of baggage on this for Danielle Smith personally. If you go back to the time that she was the Wild Rose leader previously, and I think a lot of critics said she didn't do a good enough job at, and she herself, I think, has said she didn't do a good enough job at working around that. So how, if at all, has that played into the race this time around?
I mean, I think it's a very interesting question, and I think probably for some full disclosure, I worked for Danielle Smith when she was Wild Rose leader for several years, and so I remember when those issues happened. I think in Alberta, what people are looking for is an understanding of what the role of government is, and that extends into things like healthcare and education, and the role that parents play in education, I think in Alberta is particularly important. Alberta is quite different from other provinces in Canada. There has been a lot of public and even government support for alternative education options to public schools. And in fact, even when there was a lot of funding and continues to be a lot of funding for public schools compete against one another for students in order to secure funding for their programs. The funding follows the student. And so in Alberta, you've got charter schools, you've got private schools, you have a very healthy homeschool sector. And all of these things, I think, are predicated on the idea that it's parents and not education bureaucrats or the union who know what's best for students. So with that in mind, I think in this leadership race, you will see a conversation about things like what kind of sex ed curriculum gets taught? What is the role of a school? Is it for them to foist a particular worldview on students, or is it about having them ask important questions and then having conversations with their parents and their families about some of these things? And for Danielle, I do think it's a story of, has a lesson been learned from how some of these issues were handled the first time around? And if it put in the same position, how will she approach some of these very difficult issues? I think that's the choice that some Albertans are going to be looking at when it comes to Danielle Smith, particularly, is are we going to see growth and change, or are we going to see a repeat of some of the perceived missteps that happened when she was Wild Rose leader 7 or 8 years ago?
You mentioned earlier in the discussion the two groups that you saw, the front runners and the other candidates. With all due respect to them, you have to look at the poll numbers and take them at face value. There's another breakdown that I see here that's kind of interesting, which is the insiders and the outsiders in a way, because you have, a bunch of people in this race that are former cabinet ministers under Jason Kenney, people like Rebecca Schultz, people like Rajan Sani, people like Leela here. You have, now again, there were some criticisms that were put by Leela here, notably towards Jason Kenney's leadership. You had also Travis Taves, who was former finance minister, step down. You had Todd Loewen, who was a member of the UCP caucus and then was very much on the outs with the core leadership with Jason Kenney, and Brian Jean and Danielle Smith, two people that really got back into politics specifically on the platform of we are going to oppose Jason Kenney. So looking at the cabinet members or former cabinet members here, do you think they will basically be just tied to Jason Kenney? Is Jason Kenney unpopular enough to the members voting in this race that looking at Rebecca Schultz or Travis Taves and being like they're the Kenney candidates is enough to keep their numbers low?
I think that's a very interesting question. And one of the things that I think has been very interesting is normally in a leadership race, the front runners all tend to have held senior positions in the former government. Cabinet ministers almost always are in the leading spots. And if you look
just to jump in there, look at the 2017 federal conservative leadership race. You had like 13 candidates, and of them, I think 50 of them were cabinet ministers under Harper.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the fact that the two apparent leading candidates, Danielle Smith and Brian Jean, neither of them were in Jason Kenney's cabinet. In fact, up until quite recently, neither one of them were even MLAs anymore. Brian Jean recently won a by-election in Fort McMurray. I think that does spell some trouble for those who were members of the Kenney government. In particular, because this was so much a government about Jason Kenney. He defined the United Conservative government. People used to make this criticism of Stephen Harper, that it was hard to name someone other than Stephen Harper in the Stephen Harper government. But I would say he actually did delegate a fair amount of responsibility to his individual ministers. I'm not 100% sure that was true with Jason Kenney. I think a lot of the files still ended up going across his desk and through his government. And as a result, there isn't a lot of name recognition, even for people who were senior cabinet ministers. I had to anecdotally explain to my own friends who Travis Taves was. And I said, well, he's been our finance minister for the past 3 years. And they did not really know that. That was kind of news to them. So I think for them to break free of the perception that they're simply offering quote unquote more of the same, they may have to articulate specific decisions or policies which they disagree with when it comes to the Kenney government. I think a lot of people would understand if they said, I had to go along with it because that's what governments do. They support the will of cabinet. When cabinet makes a decision, they go ahead. But here are some things that I had concerns with. And here's how I would have been different. And here's how I will be different if I become Premier of Alberta in 2 months' time. And that's a really difficult needle to thread, because you have to be critical of your own record in office. And a lot of politicians are reluctant to do that. And I do think, though, that if they're going to be seen as anything more than just more of the same, they are going to have to be specific and not just say we need to do a better job listening or we need to do a better job communicating. Well, no, I think that wasn't enough in order to be seen as truly different.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I will say it is interesting. At the beginning, a lot of people were telling me that Travis Taves was the front runner just by virtue of his role. A finance minister in a majority government, this seems like an important thing. And he did, I think, shore up a lot of the establishment support. I don't even mean that in a derisive way, but he shored up a lot of those endorsements that you'd expect, but really has not been the one that I'm seeing crossing my social media feed. I know when Elie was on, he wasn't a name that, that he was seeing in the comments flooding by. So I don't actually think that he's resonated with people. Now, again, I mean, a lot of it is how you can get out your vote and do all that. But let's bring Elie back on in a moment here, or actually for a moment, because I'm curious, Elie, what are the issues people are bringing up? Beyond the candidates, what are the issues? You mentioned a couple, but are people talking about the issues that we know are designated as the themes of the debate tonight?
Well, Andrew, first of all, I forgot to point this out earlier. There is a bit of confusion I noticed among some of our viewers. This is not a federal Conservative Party of Canada leadership debate. This is for the Alberta United Conservative Party. So there's CPC, which is federal, and UCP, which is provincial. I know it's confusing.
It's never
not,
good. No, it's not. It's never good branding for the race when they can't even tell people that there is a race going on, which I think is actually a big problem.
Usually we don't have usually two races at the same time. So for our viewers, please know this is not CPC, because I think if they don't know and they just see these random people, they're going to be like, who the heck are these people, right? In terms of
Sorry, Elie, we used up your moment on that, but we will come back to you. But I know we're coming up to the time for the debate here, and I want to get to an update we have from our reporter in Alberta, Rachel Emmanuel, who is coming to us from Medicine Hat. Let's take a look at Rachel's update.
Hey guys, it's Rachel Emmanuel, True North's Alberta Correspondent. I'm here live in Medicine Hat, where the first official UCP leadership race is set to begin at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. This is our first opportunity to see all 7 approved candidates face off in an official party debate. So I'm super excited to see what they have in store for us and see how the format will allow for each candidate to have equal time. Obviously 7 candidates is a lot to account for. Some of the main issues to keep your eye out for this evening is health services. How do the candidates plan to address AHS? There's been a lot of unhappiness with how they responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. So you can be certain that we'll hear some issues on that, as well as how candidates plan to advocate for Alberta and Ottawa. There's been a lot of tension in that relationship lately. So I'm looking really for some specific plans and policies that candidates are going to be advocating for in terms of how they hope to get Alberta a fair deal with Ottawa. All right, looking forward to it.
That was True North's Alberta correspondent Rachel Emmanuel in front of the helicopter that I think we now see standing by for the debate. I actually don't know which candidate the helicopter has endorsed, but I think they're going to do that at the end of it. And looking at where those rotors are, hopefully no one will hit the on switch during the debate, because I think that'll make for a very, very awkward moment on the screen here. But that's like an Aaron O'Toole move, by the way, doing the Sea King helicopter photo op. So good they're doing that here. And again, if you're wondering where that helicopter came from, the debate is being held at the Halo Air Ambulance Hangar in Medicine Hat. Very important local business there in southern Alberta. This is going to be starting up in just a moment now, so you can see on your screen. We'll carry it live. Let me just ask you, William, who are you expecting to be the one to watch tonight? You know these candidates, you know the players. Who do you think's the one to watch for?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a couple things that each candidate's going to have their own goals for tonight. I think Travis Toews has to make a bit of a splash tonight. I think he has to bring himself out of Jason Kenney's shadow and say, here's my distinct vision for Alberta. Here's why I'm the best choice. And at the same time, here's why, say, Danielle Smith is the wrong choice. Brian Jean, who in my opinion has had a pretty low-key campaign so far, which is surprising given that he was second to Jason Kenney in the last leadership race.
And also a very high-profile by-election victory for him not that long ago.
Nope, absolutely true. I think in some ways Danielle has eaten his lunch when it comes to this leadership race. I think a lot of the support that might have been seen going to him, there's a perception it's maybe now going to Danielle instead. He has to try and define this race in such a way that he becomes, the dominant player. If you're against the Jason Kenney status quo, you have to vote for Brian Jean and not Danielle Smith. But that also means he'll be taking some tough runs at Danielle. And for Danielle, I think she has to fend off accusations that her policies are either going to make her unelectable in a general election, or that voting for her would render the conservative choice, the united conservative choice, too unpalatable for Albertans. So she'll be emphasizing that she's the voice you need, the right choice, the smart choice when it comes to standing up against Justin Trudeau in Ottawa. I think you'll see her making that point.
Just in a moment here, William, for people, because I've seen a few folks ask the question here, how's the actual vote structured? What's the format for winning the race?
So it's a mail-in ballot and with an in-person voting option on election day, and you will end up voting, again, it's a 50% plus one. So like the federal conservative race, no single candidate is declared the winner until they have a majority of votes. So in the first vote, 7 candidates. Could be very tough for any one person to get 50% plus one. If they don't, then the candidate who received the fewest votes, they're dropped off from the ballot. Their second choices are redistributed to the remaining candidates. That process is repeated until one of the candidates achieves a 50% plus one. The addition of in-person voting stations, of course, means, though, that there'll be actual vote counting on election day. It can't all be done in the lead up to the race, which means it could be a bit uncertain when the actual result gets announced. But yeah, it's not like in a regular election, a first past the post, the candidate with the most votes wins. This is someone who has to get second and third choice votes. Maybe that's good news for Travis Toews. Maybe he's counting on a lot of support from Ray Jinsani, Rebecca Schulz, and the other cabinet ministers to fall behind him. I don't know.
And you're saying votes, not points, correct?
That is true. It is a one member, one vote system. All ridings, doesn't matter if 1,000 people voting your riding or 10. That's how many votes. It's 1,000 or 10. There's no equalizing. There's no redistributing. None of those things that Albertans like, by the way, either redistributing or equalizing. We're against both of those things culturally.
Are there any candidates in this race that really have a proven track record with aggressive membership drives? Like in the federal race, when Patrick Brown got in, everyone knew, okay, Patrick Brown's going to hustle and sell memberships. Is that something that Danielle Smith and Brian Jean, who have led a party before, were particularly known for?
The thing is Danielle became Wild Rose leader when the party was still very small. We're talking about a few thousand people choosing a leader, not tens of thousands or even more than 100,000, depending on how membership sales go here. I would say Brian Jean, probably out of all the candidates, has the most experience selling memberships in a large pan-provincial leadership race. And of course, he did it 3.5 years ago, when he was up against Jason Kenney, who had quite a formidable sales machine. The next question is, does that Jason Kenney membership sales machine still exist in some capacity? And if it does, are they moving over to support Travis Toews? Are they going somewhere else? Are they sitting this race out? That's a big unknown that we don't know right now.
Yeah, Rebecca Schulz had a very high-profile endorsement from Ronna Ambrose. We know is very popular in the conservative movement, quite a good friend of Jason Kenney's as well. But I think a lot of the time we tend to overstate the role that endorsements have in membership sales, unless it's accompanied by someone who has a machine, who has a list, and who's prepared to put that towards you. We are running a couple of minutes behind here, but you can see on the screen, we'll cut to the debate the second the debate starts up, and I see someone on the stage putting binders down, so that seems to be a good start towards getting it off to the races here. Let me just ask you, William, about preparation here, because obviously it's a shorter race, but there's going to be another official debate. There's going to be other opportunities for candidates to speak out, to do interviews. Do you want to hold back some of your best material for later in this race, or do you want to come out swinging and really make that splash now?
It's interesting. I think for many of the candidates who will be on stage tonight is an important night to give themselves some profile and some differentiation from everybody else in the race. I always joke, the worst place to be in a leadership race is when the media are describing it and they talk about a handful of the front-running candidates, and then they say, also in the race are yada, yada, yada. And
so what you did in like the first 3 minutes of this, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. and it's a real problem, because also in the race are these people is a really difficult position to be in when you're trying to raise money, when you're trying to sell a bunch of memberships across the province. So tonight is one of the few times, I think, when hopefully a lot of UCP members or potential members are going to be watching, and in which case, you have to stand out. You have to make a bit of a splash. The other factor, of course, is that there is about only, I think, 16 or so days until that membership cutoff happens. You are running out of what we would call in politics runway to get your campaign into a competitive position. And so if you aren't really coming out of the gate, I think, in a good position tonight, you're just going to have such a hard time trying to build a membership sales machine and sell a lot of memberships in the next 2 and a bit weeks.
I think it was the 2012 Republican presidential primary where they had so many candidates running. They had 2 debates. They had like the upper tier candidate debate and the lower tier candidate debate. And I'm like, how bad would it be if you were just relegated to, debating Carly Fiorina or whatever, while everyone else debates in the big one? So In this particular case, at least everyone's on one stage. But you're right. I mean, if you're going into this and certain people in the audience are only paying attention to what Danielle Smith has to say and what Brian Jean has to say, that's a bit of a problem. And interestingly enough, Rachel Emmanuel, who is our Alberta correspondent on the ground there, has said that the UCP is not telling reporters the format. They've not published it anywhere. I've gotten little bits of it from contacts I have on the leadership campaigns, but they're keeping the format a secret. But what we do know is that there's going to be a lot of interaction. There's going to be a lot of one-on-one. One person said they heard there was going to be like almost a cross-examination of sorts where a candidate gets to put another candidate on the hot seat. And interestingly enough, I've moderated debates that have some element of that. And there's a strategy to who you pick, because on one hand, you want to be able to fire the silver bullet that goes towards the front runner that makes them look bad. But on the other hand, if you ask someone a question, you're also giving them 60, 90 seconds, whatever it is, of time to speak to the camera. Whereas, if you ask a nobody a question or a less well-known candidate, then you're elevating them in a way. So I think that's the big challenge here. It sounds like we have the debate just about to start here. We'll throw to that as soon as we have it ready. But let me just say, William, do you have any predictions here? Who do you think is going to come out on top?
That's an interesting question. Out of the candidates who have run before, Brian Jean and Danielle Smith have both done debates. They've both done leaders' debates. Brian Jean, I will say, from 2015 wasn't particularly favorably reviewed for his debate performance. I'm sure that's in the minds of his campaign team, and they've been working very hard on that since. Danielle Smith, very telegenic.
Sorry, we'll have to cut away. We'll have to cut you off there. The debate is beginning now, live from Medicine Hat.
Medicine Hat and Cypress Medicine Hat for the inspiration for this event. We are very pleased to be partnering with them. Also of note is that the questions tonight were developed from thousands of submissions received from our membership. This leadership election is an extremely important decision for our party. We are electing a premier and the leader who will take us into the next election. Best of luck to the candidates with their efforts here tonight. I would be remiss if I didn't remind you of these important deadlines. Anyone wanting to participate in this event has to have a UCP membership by 11:59 p.m. on August 12th. Ballots will be mailed on September 2nd and must be received by October 3rd. The new UCP leader will be presented to all Albertans on October 6th in Calgary. Now, on with the show. I'd like to introduce you to our moderator for this debate, Jeff Davison. Jeff is a former Calgary City Councillor and presently the CEO of the Prostate Cancer Centre. Take it away, Jeff.
All right. Thank you, Cynthia. Give Cynthia a round of applause. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first United Conservative Party 2022 official leadership. Candidates on stage to give us their positions on a series of questions submitted by you, the UCP party membership, from across the province. Each candidate will be given an equal opportunity to speak. The order by which we address the questions from our members has been predetermined by My only rule for these rebuttals is that candidates can't use them all at once. So to keep things fair, if a candidate is named in the debate and they aren't an active participant in it, I'll bring them in and allow them some time to respond. Okay, and just a reminder to all the candidates, we've got a lot of things to get through tonight, so we're going to be keeping a sharp eye on the clock. If you go over time, I will ask you to stop. If you choose to keep talking, we'll just cut the microphone off, and trust me, it's far more embarrassing for you than it will be for me. All right, at the end of this all, I'm going to ask each candidate in order of random draw to give a 1-minute closing statement, which would be their final pitch to you, the UCP membership across Alberta. And last request, all right, this one's for members of the audience, okay? I ask one thing from you. You refrain from reacting to answers from the candidates. Please, no clapping or cheering or booing or no signs or placards. Those just interfere with all of our cameras. Let's be respectful and remind ourselves that we're all one party here. Time is tight and we will not be stopping the clock, so please don't distract the candidates. All right, everybody ready? Here we go. Let's start things off with opening statements. Mr. Lawton, you have the floor. 1 minute, please.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here today, and it's great to be in Medicine Hat. It's been a great campaign so far, crisscrossing Alberta, and it's great to be here in the southeast part of the province. Of course, I'm from the northwest part of the province in the Peace Country, and there I'm a husband, a father of 5, a grandfather of 8, and maybe more on the way. But I'm running for the UCP leadership for one simple reason: to give our party back to its membership, to bring back trust, accountability, transparency. Now, my campaign theme is Your Alberta, Your Way. And this is my focus is to offer the party an opportunity to reconnect with the broader Conservative movement and all Albertans. I believe the best way to do this is with a fresh slate of ideas, firmly grounded in principles and values that we all share. I look forward to sharing many of these ideas going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Ms. Smith, over to you. 1 minute.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm Danielle Smith. I'm a business owner. I've been a business advocate. I've been a print, radio, TV, and podcast journalist, and I can say I've been in the public eye for about 25 years. I've discussed thousands of issues. I've been right about a lot of things. I've been wrong about a few things. But that's okay. I'm not perfect. I do always try to learn from others. I try to consult broadly, and I try to keep an open discussion and a fair mind as I'm listening to people who disagree with me. And that, I think, is important to bring to politics. It's important to have that respectful debate and the broad range of discussion on a whole variety of issues. The reason I think we're here tonight, though, is because we're trying to choose the best leader for this party. We're trying to ask the question, who is going to be the best person to stand up to Ottawa? Who is going to be the best person to take on Rachel Notley and win in the next election? And who is the best person to give you back your freedoms and to protect them? And I think that person's me. And I look forward to telling you why.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Right on time. All right, Ms. Sani, 1 minute. Up to you.
Thank you, Jeff. Canada is going down a dangerous path, and Alberta is being seriously impacted, negatively impacted by decisions made in Ottawa. We all know that. Decisions made through an ideological lens without empathy for the communities that rely on those industries, the people who rely on those jobs, the family incomes, and the customers who benefit from our products. And what are we to do about it? Alberta must fight back, absolutely, but we can't be risky and we can't be hot-headed. Being Premier is a lot more than being a talk show host. We need stable and serious government in Alberta now more than ever before. I experienced this in 2007 and again in 2015 during the royalty review when investment fled the province, and that was due to provincial policy. And that was tame compared to the Sovereignty Act. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ms. Sani. Okay, reset the clock. Ms. Schultz, 1 minute.
I'm Rebecca Schultz, and I'm running to be the leader of this amazing party and the next Premier of Alberta because I love Alberta. We cannot take the future of our province for granted. Albertans I've met say they want a leader who can unite this party, and that starts with our team to take on Rachel Notley and the NDP in 2023. That takes someone who knows that unity starts with our team and you, our party members. Someone who is disciplined, who won't let you down with embarrassing comments, but instead
for prosperity, opportunity, and growth.
Thank you, Mr. Taves. Last but not least, Mr. Jean, over to you, 1 minute.
Thanks, Jeff. Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Jean, and I'm running to be the leader of the party, this great party that so many of us did so much work to start. I'm running for the leadership because I want to make Albertans the happiest, the healthiest, the most free and most prosperous people in Canada and the world. I want to be your premier to help you have more control of your life, more autonomy. As an Albertan, I've strived to serve my community, my neighbors, whether as a business owner, a lawyer, a community volunteer, a member of parliament, a party leader, or an MLA. I believe that the United Conservative Party has the best ideas and the best principles. If the UCP is led in a way that connects with normal everyday Albertans, we will have success and we will serve and lead Albertans to prosperity for many years to come. This party has wonderful people in it. We only have to renew the UCP and connect it to the wishes and the needs of Albertans. And if we do that, we will win the next election against the NDP. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jean. All right, thank you to all the candidates. All right, we're now going to move into the question round. So the first question is going to you, Mr. Lawton. You'll have, just a reminder, you'll have 2 minutes to answer, at which point then I'll ask you the question, who would you like to debate, and we'll go from there. All right, first topic. Topic is affordability. Let's face it, the cost of living in Alberta and around the globe is getting more expensive. Significant price increases for gas, food, heating our homes, and electricity, coupled with skyrocketing inflation, have all negatively affected Alberta families, and in particular our seniors, First Nations, and other vulnerable communities. If Alberta's primary value proposition is an affordable, high quality of life, how would you work to ensure this for everyone? And what specifically would you do?
Hi, let me just chime in here that the issues you are seeing are actually with the feed that the United Conservative Party is putting out. We're taking our feed from them, and it's unfortunate because they don't seem to be aware that these issues are going on. So there are aspects that are being missed. I'm sorry about that. And if you look at other streams, which I would encourage you not to do, you'll find that it is actually the same issue there. We can jump back to the debate now in Medicine Hat. And apparently that was another false start. So this is an issue. And again, it's funny. We were trying to do a little live update with Rachel Emmanuel early. You may know at the beginning we played a video that she was pre-recorded, and she couldn't connect because she was in rural Alberta in an airplane hangar. And at the time we thought, oh, well, that's unfortunate. We wanted to have her live and didn't realize that this would prevent the UCP itself from being able to put a live stream of its debate forward. So let's hope they're recording the video at least, so afterwards it will be available for people to watch. I know it's just me on the screen right now, but we are waiting for their feed to start, and literally the second their feed starts, we'll go back to the debate in progress, which is right now.
For everyone, and what specifically would you do to build upon the Alberta advantage?
Sure, affordability is a big deal in Alberta right now. We're facing a time of inflation that we haven't seen in decades. And as Minister of Finance, I was privileged to suspend the fuel tax in this province, saving every Albertan 13 cents a litre every time they fuel up. Number one, I would make that program permanent. In Alberta, we can do that. All Albertans can benefit from an owned resource because our revenues are not jeopardized as our royalty income offsets any tax that we might lose in that program. The other thing I will do, and that is I will scrap the GDL for young Alberta drivers. Right now, 500,000 young Alberta drivers still have their GDL. That means that program's not providing any safety to our roads. What it does do, it adds $150 of cost to every young Albertan and requires them to do another road test. I would scrap that immediately. I will also bring forward a child tax credit that will work effectively like expanding the personal exemption on your tax return. That will provide every family with $2,000 of additional deduction or tax credit for every child. At a time when many families are really pushed and stretched to make the end of the month, that will provide real relief.
All right. Okay. That ends the first part of the question. We're now going to go into 4 minutes of open debate between Mr. Taves, Mr. Lawton. Mr. Lawton, kick us off.
Okay, so Mr. Taves, I guess one thing that I think is concerning to Albertans is the $4 billion in COVID spending that the Auditor General wasn't able to figure out. So I think we need to have some answers on that. And when I look at this government's record, again, we're sitting here in $112 billion of debt. I don't see that there's been a plan to pay down that debt and start cutting back on those interest payments. So I would like to hear some more information on that. I think that we're in a situation now where we've watched this train wreck coming slowly, and now we're in a situation where when you compare our debt compared to the federal debt, and on an individual basis, we're just as high or higher. And that's, I think, alarming for Albertans that are working hard and doing their best to support their families and living within their means. And we have a government that hasn't been living within its means. We complained about the NDP and how their budget was so high, and we complained about their spending when we were in opposition. But here we are spending 10% more than the NDP did.
I think see you're ready to jump in, Mr. Taves. Yeah. Feel free to jump in anytime.
All right.
This is open debate.
Good. All right. Well, thank you. Here, first thing on the Auditor General report. Number one, there's no $4 billion that are missing. The Auditor General gave the Government of Alberta a clean audit report. For all of you in the room that know what a clean audit report is, that means there are no funds missing, not $1. And yes, we have brought fiscal discipline to the province. I, as the Minister of Finance, brought fiscal discipline to this province. We had a $10 billion overspend, a spending addiction inherited from the NDP and previous PC governments, if I'm honest. We have narrowed, in fact, by this fiscal year, we will have eliminated that $10 billion overspend. That was job number one in putting this province on a sustainable fiscal trajectory because, friends, we balanced the budget not on $100 oil. We balanced it on $70, $69, and $66 oil by bringing fiscal discipline to the province's finances and positioning this province for investment attraction, economic growth, which results in expanded fiscal capacity. That combination has allowed me as the Minister of Finance to present a balanced budget through all 3 years of the fiscal plan. Finally, putting this province on a sustainable fiscal trajectory.
Let's let Mr. Lawton jump in here. What have you got to say about
that? Okay, Mr. Taves, I appreciate your coming on side with the GDL. I think that's actually a really good idea. But I think what a lot of people are wondering, when we have musing about a PST, I think Albertans are very concerned about that. I am against, and I never have been in favor and never even mused about a PST like you have. And I think that's something that should be cleared up right away, that this government will not put forward a PST on Albertans. I think that's very important. That's something we've talked about a lot, and I think we've defended that a lot. But now we have a couple of candidates up here that have talked about the PST, and I think we need to set the record straight.
And I'll set it straight.
All right, so go ahead.
And I will set the record straight. There's only one leadership hopeful that I'm aware of on this stage that has not only mused about a PST, but actually advocated for a PST. And Todd Lowen, that's the leadership hopeful standing right next to you. I have never mused about a PST. Look, if you want to know what I would do as Premier, look at what I did as Finance Minister. I balanced the budget by actually reducing business taxes. I balanced the budget by bringing fiscal discipline to this province.
Let's get a quick rebuttal in here. Let's get going.
But you did also muse on the PST. And as far as the $4 billion, could you explain where it went? I mean, the Auditor General said that there was no records of where it went. Where did that go?
The Auditor General gave the province a clean audit report. It was recorded.
But that doesn't tell us where the money went.
Spending, full stop. It's all recorded and accounted for properly.
All right. Okay, so that ends the first round of open debate. That actually went a little smoother than I thought it would be. There was no throwing. That was perfect. Okay, so we've had a few folks put up their paddle. That means we've got 45 seconds to chime in. I have Ms. Zahir, Ms. Schultz, Ms. Sani, and Ms. Smith. Is that the correct order? Anybody else? All right. Okay, let's go ahead, Ms. Zahir, 45 seconds. Sorry.
Thank you so much. First of all, there's many people on this stage that were part of government. There is no I in team. We do these things together. If we're going to build this team, let's start talking about how we did these things collectively. Second of all, yes, reindex tax benefits. We need to catch up for the past years, but you also need to notify the CRA to reduce the tax withholding on Albertans and the paychecks. That actually leaves more money in your pockets. Our government has not kept up with pace with inflation. And for that, we actually owe you an apology. So we need to reindex AISH, Alberta seniors benefits. We have to catch up and move forward. I would like to also present an opportunity for small business tax thresholds, index of inflation. Women-run, Indigenous-run businesses, farmers, manufacturing, New Canadians are growing at amazing rates, including probably faster than Alberta.
That's 45 seconds there. I know it's fast. Thanks, Ms. Zahir. Okay, Ms. Schultz, 45 seconds to you.
I was the first candidate to bring forward a platform on affordability because it is the #1 issue I hear from Albertans. Invest in kids' activities. Yes, I love that idea. We committed to it first. Getting rid of the small business tax, starting for 2 years so that small businesses know that they're respected. They're the backbone of our community. I absolutely think we need to continue fuel tax relief and re-index personal income taxes. I was also the first candidate to put forward a plan for what to do with the surplus, 35% into debt repayment, 35% in saving for our future, and 30% to address affordability needs. Now, I would say the same. One person does not balance a budget. As a minister who worked hard to transform every area of her ministry to do better by Albertans, not only in the types of programs we offer, but the amount of dollars we invest.
That's it. That's 45. I know it's fast. All right, Ms. Sani, 45 seconds. Go ahead.
Thank you. And yes, of course, affordability is on top of mind for most Albertans. And these issues with inflation hit middle-class, hardworking families the most. And I had announced earlier on, several weeks earlier, that I was planning to ensure that we index income tax brackets and we index social support such as seniors benefits and AISH recipients as well, because again, vulnerable communities are also hit very, very hard with the inflation rates that we haven't seen these rates since the early 80s. I also want to make a comment about GDL. While it is a good policy on paper, I would have to say that it sounds like there has been limited consultation done because driving schools would be impacted very severely with this kind of policy.
All right. Ms. Smith, over to you, 45 seconds.
All right, as I said, as a columnist over 25 years, I've mused on a lot of issues, and I want to put into context my musing. It was when we were at $24 billion in a deficit. We only had $2 billion worth of resource revenue. I think when you have those circumstances, it's no surprise that the Premier and the Finance Minister and I were talking about how do we solve that problem. Fortunately, resource revenues have bailed us out again, notwithstanding what the former Finance Minister said. We have a $4 billion surplus. That's great. We've got $16 billion worth of resource revenue this year. That means we have a $12 billion structural deficit that we still haven't solved. I wrote a major paper for the School of Public Policy that had several elements about how we would restructure, how we would create house spending accounts so that we could address this issue and grow our Heritage Savings Trust
That's
Fund.
time. There we go.
Thank you.
Okay, first question out of the way. No takers on any other things? All right. Okay, we're going to move on. Question 2. This question is for you, Ms. Smith. It has to do with the environment. Conservative Albertans are often villainized as not caring about the environment despite having a track record of clean and ethical energy production that supports a healthy Canadian economy. The opposition targets Conservatives with negative rhetoric around GHG reduction, decarbonization, net zero policies, and adaptation of physical planning, all under the umbrella of a climate emergency, spending billions without any defined outcomes. Alternatively, most Conservatives would say they care a great deal about the environment today and what they will leave behind for generations to come. Albertans value our clean air, lakes, outdoor spaces, trails, and mountains, to name a few. What would you do to change the narrative around this negative environmental stereotype, and what specific targets would you strive to achieve in order to create a greener, more sustainable Alberta? You have 2 minutes.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I remember getting hit by Graham Thompson years ago in 2012 when I talked about how the science wasn't settled on climate change. And I can tell you what I've come around full circle on that. I am now probably the first and early adopter of thinking that we can hit a net zero target and we can get there faster. than anywhere else. And I'll tell you why I believe that. Number one has been the incredible innovation that we have seen among our entrepreneurs and in the business community. And we as Conservatives have always believed that technology was going to be the answer. And I can tell you it is the answer. Whether we capture the CO2 and bury it underground, or whether we turn it into useful products like carbon nanofiber, which can be a replacement for steel, cement, so we can make a more durable construction material, plastics. We can also turn it into industrial minerals that can be turned into soap. My favorite one is you can turn it into alcohol. There is a company called Airco that takes a pure stream of CO2 and makes it into vodka. Now you can just imagine the marketing opportunities on that one. So when I look at the challenge that we have, that is the message that we have to get out there, is that we have immense pore space in Alberta that will allow us to capture CO2. Our conversion of our economy to a hydrogen economy is already well underway with this government. We're building a hub in the Edmonton area. If we start building hydrogen fueling stations all over this province, we'll be able to change over our long-haul vehicles to be hydrogen-based. Then we will be able to be a hub for the construction of hydrogen vehicles. Why not attract Toyota here so that they can build their Toyota Mirais? Why do we have to wait for Ottawa to be the center of the auto industry? We can be the center of auto manufacturing here. But that's not the only issue. Once we get the issue of CO2 out of the way and people see that we are serious about solving it and getting there faster than anywhere else, we also have to tackle the issues of air quality, of water quality, of making sure that we're doing habitat protection, which our farmers and ranchers do so well. And I can't wait to sell that message.
All right, thank you. Okay, who would you like to debate on this topic?
I would like to debate Rajan Sani.
All right, Ms. Sani. Again, the question was, what would you do to change the narrative around this negative environmental stereotype, and what specific targets would you strive to achieve in order to create a greener, more sustainable Alberta? You have a minute and a half.
Thank you. Well, there are a number of areas that we need to look at, but I'm going to talk about energy specifically. The reality is that even Canadians across this country have a very negative perception of Alberta. They think of us as rich emitters. And before we can tackle the issues with security of supply, we need to make sure that we have more information out all across the nation to ensure that Canadians understand that Alberta energy is the cleanest, most ethical source of energy absolutely in the world. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about as it relates to energy, because we talk quite a bit about transition in energy, and there are two aspects that we have to keep in mind. We've already talked about hydrogen, that has been mentioned. We have ample natural gas resources here in Alberta, and that can translate into hydrogen supply. We are still working on the demand portion of that equation, and that was some of the work that I was doing as Minister of Transportation. Now, going to LNG, I thought that we had missed the boat on LNG, but that's actually not true. Because of the geopolitical situation that we are seeing right now in Europe, we know, again, security of supply is on top of mind for everyone. And Alberta is, again, on the cusp, uniquely positioned to be the supplier of natural gas for LNG. But what concerns me is when we start talking about things like the Sovereignty Act, that is the number one thing that is going to drive investment away from our province.
All right, I got to cut you off there. I'm sorry. I know a minute and a half is tough. It's all tough. It's hard to get everything you want to say in a couple minutes. All right, let's start 4 minutes of open debate. Ms. Smith, I'm going to start with you. And if I have to, I'll force back and forth 30 seconds so that we kind of make some points and allow some rebuttal time.
You got it. I'd love to talk more about the Sovereignty Act because it's absolutely essential to getting our...
Well, let's keep this one on the environment.
I will. It's absolutely essential to getting our products to market because what I would like to see is us take the lead on developing economic corridors. We have been waiting since the 1930s for Ottawa to develop economic corridors. It's been almost 100 years. They are not going to develop economic corridors for us. But we've got such a huge opportunity to partner with our First Nations community. We've got the treaty settlements that have happened in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. There's a group of 14 First Nations that want to take the lead on developing an economic corridor. And it would be 10 kilometers wide. And the nice part about it is by making it wide enough, you can take care of your caribou habitat. You can make sure that you're doing your landowner protection. You can identify endangered species and habitat and wetlands, and you can take care of that as well. But then you can also develop the rail line.
I just want to say
let's
that,
let Ms. Sani come in.
yeah, we don't need an unconstitutional, impractical Sovereignty Act to develop economic corridors. In fact, that work is already underway. As the Minister of Transportation, this was one of my key priorities, and I worked with MLA Shane Getson on this, because what happened when we had the BC storms and those highways and bridges were decimated, all the traffic came through highway number 3. And that is why one of the first things that I did when I interacted with the federal government was to tell them that we need to develop that economic corridor. That's an agri-food corridor. And I applied for monies through the National Trade
Corridor
Corridor
go back here
Funds.
for a minute, because the question is on the environment, right? We're looking for tangible pieces to move forward in terms of how do you change that negative stereotype, right? And what specific targets are you going to move forward with to achieve a more sustainable, greener Alberta? So
Well,
keep it
part of
focused
that-
there. That's a big
part of-
membership question.
Part of that conversation is ensuring that we're maintaining investor confidence, because if we are going to invest in greener technology and we are going to encourage people from across the globe to come to Alberta, for example, if we want to invest in high-speed rail that could be powered by hydrogen-powered locomotive, that investor confidence needs to be maintained. Any work that you want to do on environmental initiatives requires bringing investment in, and it requires being entrepreneurial, and it requires supporting our local residents as well. But if we have a situation where we have a candidate who is inviting a situation of turmoil, of chaos, and inviting investors to stay away from our province because we're too politically risky,
All right.
that is a
Ms. Smith,
problem,
you
not
better
just
jump
for
in
the
here.
environment,
Ottawa
for
has
energy
created
and
chaos.
agriculture.
Ottawa has created chaos. Ottawa has canceled our projects. Ottawa has caused Energy East and Tech Frontier Mine and tens of billions of other projects to be canceled. The reason these are linked is because part of our strategy in reducing greenhouse gas emissions is exporting our clean LNG to displace coal in India and China. We cannot do that because Ottawa keeps standing in our way. We need to build economic corridors. We need to take the lead on that. We need to work with our First Nations. We need to take the lead on solving the environmental issues so that we can get our product to Churchill, to Thunder Bay, to Tuktoyaktuk, to Port-au-Prince Rupert. And we have to exert our sovereignty to do that because Ottawa is not going to do it for us.
With Ottawa, absolutely. And that fight is long, it's arduous. There are no shortcuts, people. There is no magical sovereignty act or any other legislation that is going to let us bypass those very difficult steps. The problem is when we shoot ourselves in the foot with provincial policies like a sovereignty act. That is creating a politically risky environment, and that is going to impact everything. Exactly what I said earlier. Environmental initiatives, energy initiatives, agricultural initiatives. This is tantalizing. The act, it's seductive, it draws you in, but it is an illusion. And my question is, what are you going to do when you can't deliver what you're trying to sell?
All right. Okay, that ends our 4 minutes. It's getting hot in here.
Getting hot.
All right. As far as paddles go, Mr. Taves, you put up your paddle there. I noticed you. 45 seconds on the clock for you. Go ahead.
All right, good. Thanks, Jeff. I have to agree with Ms. Sani on this one. Implementing the Sovereignty Act, simply, we can't wish all of Ottawa's obstructionism away by waving the magic wand on the Sovereignty Act. I agree. A Sovereignty Act, the way it is proposed, would ultimately bring a lack of predictability and uncertainty into this province that would drive investment out. Look, we've made great progress in the last 3 years. Alberta will lead the nation in economic growth this year and next. We cannot unwind that. We don't win when we operate from a position of weakness. Now, what we need to do, we need to sell what we do already. We have the most responsible energy and agriculture industries in the world. We need to sell their responsibility because the world needs more Alberta energy and Alberta agriculture.
All right, thank you. Right on time. Were there any other paddles that I missed? Nobody? Going once? All right, twice. Let's move on here. Question 3 is for Ms. Sani. All right, it's on healthcare reform. The COVID-19 pandemic placed enormous pressure on health systems across the country and around the world. Canada's premiers say it is intensified pre-existing fractures in health systems all across the country and that we're now at a critical point. The premiers are asking the federal government to increase the Canada Health Transfer to help ensure we all have access to high quality and timely health services. With specifics, as leader, how would you ensure that Albertans get the tests, procedures, and health services they need when they need them? Ms. Sani, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Jeff. Excellent question, because healthcare is another issue that's been on top of mind for Albertans. When I launched my campaign, one of the first things I did was to indicate that I will launch a transparent, open inquiry into the pandemic response, because we have done a number of things right in this response, and we have done a number of things wrong. We all know that, and there are a diversity of opinions on this matter, and we need everyone to come to the table to discuss that. The outcome of that inquiry will show us where the gaps are in the healthcare system that arose as a result of the pandemic. So that is number one. Number two, my intention is to repair relationships with doctors, physicians, healthcare workers, nurses, because we cannot move forward in any significant fashion on any kind of healthcare reform if we don't have those who are central and intrinsic to the system at the table. Many of you know that your physicians are community leaders as well, and we have to stop this war with the physicians. Number three, I think everybody in this room will agree that there are issues with Alberta Health Services. We know that. I was in rural Alberta not too long ago in a room full of elected officials, and there was a big screen on the TV with a representative from AHS. He told everybody in that room that there is nothing to see here. You have what you need and you have enough doctors. The data shows it. There was a woman, several people actually, who are crying in that room. She said to me, I will die in this community because first of all, we won't get an ambulance. And secondly, if an ambulance does come, there will be no doctor at that hospital. So Alberta Health Services is an inverted triangle. It needs to be flipped. It's too top heavy. And one of the comments that came out actually from physicians in Edmonton was that maybe we need to move back to regional boards. There are many aspects of AHS that need to be dismantled.
All right, that's 2 minutes. Who would you like to debate on the healthcare topic?
Ms. Danielle Smith.
All right, Ms. Smith, I'll repeat the question one more time for you. All right, well, let's settle down, folks. With specifics as leader, how would you ensure that Albertans get the tests, procedures, and health services they need when they need them? You have a minute and 1/2.
Sure. I just want to take a moment to clarify a comment I made in a podcast last week about cancer that was misunderstood. I know that cancer can strike anyone at any time without any relation to lifestyle, especially kids, but not just kids. It happened to my mother-in-law too. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and only survived 3 months after diagnosis. And by the time they found out, she was so malnourished that they weren't able to continue her chemo treatments. That's why I became such a proponent of early detection, early treatment, nutrition, and holistic medicine. There are so many more options. If you diagnose early, then you can treat early. And that's what I was trying to say, albeit very awkwardly. But it's in that vein that is why I proposed health spending accounts, because we spend so much money on the back end when people have a disease that manifests, and we spend no money on the front end on prevention to keep people well. And so if we were to establish health spending accounts with $300 in it, we'd all be able to deal with the trauma of the last 2 years. Mental health, counseling, nutrition, dietitian, naturopathic doctors, chiropractors, physiotherapists. If we can start spending some money at the front end, I think it's going to be transformative in the system, and we will save money as people are not going into the system. And when we get into fall respiratory virus season, we're going to make sure that we have enough room to be able to handle that surge in patient load. That's the first step I'd take.
All right, thank you, Ms. Smith. All right, let's start the clock for 4 minutes of debate. Ms. Sawney, kick us off.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And thank you, Ms. Smith, for your clarification of your comments. But I'm sorry, I'm not buying it, because you made a subsequent video where you actually doubled down on your perspective. And the reality is that those comments are very hurtful to any Albertan, any Canadian who has lost somebody from cancer, or anybody who is suffering from cancer right now. There was another aspect to cancer that I want to talk about right now. When I had launched, I had talked about mental health supports. It's a reality that many cancer survivors experience debilitating depression after their treatments. So to the comments that were made basically diminishes the experience of cancer survivors and their families. And I want to know, when are you going to apologize to Alberta for the comments that you made?
I did apologize because I was clearly misunderstood. One of the main points I wanted to make as well, I've been talking with iCore Blood Services. They have, and I mentioned this in the podcast as well, they have a test of $1,300 that would allow us to look at biomarkers in the blood. I think every one of us who've had a loved one die of cancer have always said, gosh, if only we caught it earlier. The reason we say that is because we know that when you catch it earlier, there are far more treatment options. That was the intention of what I wanted to say. I know that that I-Corps Blood Services has approached the government to see if they would fund a pilot program into this $1,300 test. You know what? If I was Premier, you bet absolutely I would. Because I know that if somebody has a pre-existing condition, if they have some kind of genetic predisposition towards cancer, if they're beginning to see early symptoms, it will be the very best way for us to diagnose, and then we can get them the wraparound services that they need, the nutrition, the exercise, the additional support, as well as traditional chemotherapy and surgical intervention and radiation.
Okay. Excellent. I'm just going to jump in here because clearly you've had time to think about this and think it through after the outcry from your original remarks. And if the apology was indeed delivered, then that is great, but I think it needs to be clarified because I have doctors and physicians and former stakeholders from community and social services telling me that this kind of rhetoric is harmful. It's harmful to Albertans. And Ms. Smith, you have a platform. You are an influencer. You have people who listen to what you say. Those kind of irresponsible comments actually speak to me that there is an issue with impulsiveness here, and there is an issue with somebody who is making rash statements holding this public platform. So let's move on to the healthcare spending account. I was talking about mental health. Anybody in this room who has ever been to a counseling session knows that $300 will pay for a session and a half. I actually have grave, I guess I'm very skeptical about this healthcare spending account. What do you do when somebody goes to the naturopath and they have 1.5 appointments? That is not enough. You're just getting your consultation and you're just getting started on your next half of an appointment.
Well,
what do you do when
right
that
now-
healthcare spending account is exhausted?
You know, right now, our public service, our government has negotiated with our public service. They get a $950 health spending account. You bet. I'd love for every Albertan to have the same level of support on health spending accounts that we give to our public service. And that's the reason why I'm advocating for it now. Maybe it starts with 300. Maybe it only allows you to take your child in to get 4 treatments from a counselor or a psychologist, but that's going to be a good start, and it's certainly better than nothing. When we look at what happened over the last 2 years of COVID lockdowns, and I haven't heard any apology from any of the cabinet ministers who imposed that on us for the last 2 years. I'd like to see an apology there. When we look at what happened over the last 2 years.
All right, audience. Okay. What did we talk about, folks? I get it. But let's not take away time from the candidates. This is about healthcare reform, not what happened in the past, okay? So remember, we're all on the same team here, okay? All right, carry on, Ms. Smith.
Well,
Sorry about that.
I'll just jump in. It's easy to make kind of remarks when you've never been in government at that capacity and you haven't had to make those tough decisions.
I stood up.
But nonetheless,
All right, folks, settle down or Jeff's going to stand up again.
Mental health should be funded much more than $300.
All right, that's it, folks. All right. Okay, we've got a few people that want to jump in here. Ms. Schultz, I saw your paddle first, then is it here, Mr. Taves?
You know, I would agree actually with a lot of what Ms. Zani had said. You know, we do have to focus on transforming AHS. I was the first candidate to release my plan. I don't believe that going back to regional boards is necessarily the answer, but what is the answer is going back to local decision making. And instead of a government of panel review and committee, we go back to listening to the front lines, whether that was in Claire's home where I heard nurses give me ideas about how we could do better staffing if those decisions weren't made in Calgary and Edmonton. Physicians in Edmonton who could save us $20,000 a day by allowing them to be innovative instead of squabbling about their salaries. We do have to be careful of the words that we use, because I would say this: bad judgment, flippant comments erode trust in our government, and that is not helpful in 2023.
All right, thank you, Ms. Schultz. Mrs. Here.
Thank you so much. I would like to bring forward a different thought process. We have an opportunity to triage here. We have nurse practitioners, and we also have something called a physician assistant, which has been around since 2013. If we fund these opportunities, these folks could actually be a gateway into doctors and absolutely being able to cover the gaps, particularly in rural areas. And I think it's really important when candidates are speaking about rural health, that you speak to rural MLAs and you speak to rural folks. When we're talking about women's care, SARS nurses, domestic violence, sexual assault, making sure that we have access to cultural sensitivity. There hasn't been one comment up here talking about the multicultural people in this province and the absolute barriers there are to folks having health care. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Taves.
Good, thank you. Healthcare's failing in rural Alberta, full stop. That's my experience in the Northwest. And that's what I hear from Albertans right across the province. Now, I don't pretend to have all the answers around healthcare, but I've made some observations in the last 2 years. Number one, AHS needs complete restructuring, and we have to decentralize their decision-making structure. That structure right now is not only failing Albertans, it's failing our frontline healthcare professionals, and that's tragic. I have to agree with a couple of the other speakers as well. There were some very irresponsible comments made this last week around cancer and around healthcare. We have to be accountable for our language. Our words matter. That's the value of a leadership race right now. So conservatives.
All right, I'm going to stop you there. All right, Mr. Jean, go ahead, please. 45 seconds.
The system's broken. I always find it amusing when people from Calgary and Edmonton tell me how our health system is going. I'm from Fort McMurray, and I'll tell you, we haven't had a healthcare system there for years and years and years. Well, I'm from the other forgotten corner. That will change if I'm Premier. We need to do things, and we don't need to blow up HS. What we need to do is work with the great doctors and nurses that we have and the technicians that we have and make things better. The Auditor General in 2017 actually set out how we need to fix it. Specifically said, it's not an issue of cost, it's not an issue of money. You are not going to fix it by throwing money at it. I've lived it. We need to focus on outcomes for patients and have the money follow them. But Danielle,
all right, that's
very
45
disappointed
seconds.
in you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jean. We're going to have
comments
to
on
stop there.
cancer.
All right, okay. You know what? I'm going to come back to you for 30 seconds after. Mr. Lawton, floor is yours, 45 seconds.
Thank you very much. Yes, I agree that with others that the system is broken. We need an investigation into what happened with the COVID response. I have colleagues here that were in the COVID cabinet, and now that it seems the public tide is changing, that all of a sudden they're trying to distance themselves from the decisions that they made there. I agree also that throwing money at it isn't going to solve the problem. We have an AHS system that needs a severe renovation. They've had 15 years to get it right, and they've been failing all the time. We have a shortage of healthcare workers. We have emergency rooms being shut down in rural Alberta. We have a post-secondary system in Alberta that doesn't graduate the needs of our society when it comes to healthcare workers and other educational opportunities. And we have a college of physicians that isn't helping either. We need to get the test done and the treatment done that we need.
All right, that's zero, Mr. Lawton. Thank you. All right. You got called out there, Ms. Smith. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to just rebut that, and then we're going to move on to the next question.
Well, you know, I invite people to listen to my full podcast. This is the reason why, even though Rajan doesn't think there's value in being a talk radio host, I can tell you there is. I can tell you I wouldn't be given a snow job by Alberta Health Services when they tell me I should jail pastors and shut down businesses and mask kids and tell them they can't go to school and create the mental health crisis that they did and bring in vaccine passports when they said they wouldn't do that. I would have consulted broadly and made sure that we didn't make those kinds of mistakes, because we will be dealing with the consequence of that for decades.
All right. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Let's get set for another question. All right. Stop clapping over here. You're going to make Jeff have to stand up again. Nobody likes that. All right. Thank you. Rebecca Schultz, this question is for you, and it is on the federal government. All right. Collaborative relationships with other orders of government are often the key to funding large-scale capital programs, providing sustainable sources of base funding for projects such as transit initiatives, and are generally beneficial to driving solutions that benefit all Albertans. However, the majority of Albertans feel the federal government is determined to make life difficult for our economic prosperity and are intentionally causing division between Albertans and other Canadians. How would you, as leader, address topics such as Bills C-21, 69, and equalization payments with the federal government in order to effect a better outcome for Albertans? And I want to hear specifics here, tangible, actionable items. All right, you've got 2 minutes. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. This is something I hear every day in every corner of this province, that Albertans absolutely want a leader and a government who will defend our constitutional rights. We are not asking for anything special. We are just asking for fairness in the Constitution. Now, I am, in fact, the only candidate on this stage that has successfully negotiated with the federal government and Justin Trudeau. Was that easy? Absolutely not. It took a lot of hard work behind the scenes. I was not about to leave $4 billion in Albertans' hard-earned tax money sitting in Ottawa to invest in parents and families right across this country and not invest in parents here. I don't believe that Albertans would have been okay with that, and that's why we went toe-to-toe with Justin Trudeau to make that happen in a way that respected small business and incorporated parent choice. I am the only I am the only person standing on stage who is able to do that. And I do believe in collaborative working relationships. In fact, when I look at my campaign launch, I not only had my local city councillor, but my local MP standing there in the room, because I do believe teaming up and working together on issues will get us a lot further than going at it alone. And that would be my approach, Jeff, when you're asking specifically on those bills, C21, C69, and overcoming equalization changes that we are not the only province that wants to see changes to. However, our approach has been to write letters, angry tweets, light our hair on fire, run around, creating chaos, making headlines, and not getting results for Albertans. That's what Albertans are tired of. It is, and I would rather go at it with an army of other provinces than going at it alone, as what others may see as Alberta being angry. And you know what? For you Albertans who are angry, I hope you know that I'm angry too, and I hear you. I see it in every area where the federal Trudeau Liberals are trying to push and infringe on areas of provincial jurisdiction. We can't let them do that. When it comes to the emissions cap, let's be clear, production is absolutely provincial. We got to fight.
I got to stop you there. Okay. Who would you like to debate on this topic?
Danielle Smith, please.
All right, Ms. Smith, you're back up. You're going to have 1.5 minutes to address the question. How would you, as leader, address topics such as Bill C21, 69, and equalization payments with the federal government in order to effect a better outcome for Albertans? And again, we're looking for some specifics here.
I know we've been passive for so long that we tend to forget that the Constitution actually gives us sovereignty in the matters that are enumerated to us. Go on to Wikipedia and they talk about our parliamentary system. That's what they say about Canada, is that legislatures in Canada are sovereign in matters that are enumerated to them. If you look up section 92, 92A, 93, 94, and 95, and I read them frequently, you will see that we have allowed the federal government to walk all over us in every single area of our jurisdiction. And with due respect to Rebecca, I know she did a good negotiation, but we still lost. We always lose when we go up against Ottawa. They take all of our money and they dribble it back with conditions. They steal the rest and they use it to win votes in Quebec and Atlantic Canada. And on the childcare proposal, you probably saw the CBC story a couple of days ago from our private childcare operators. They're now forbidden from expanding their operations. When they have a profit, it's called an overage, and they have to go to the bureaucrats to get permission on how to spend it. They're not allowed to use any of the money for their capital projects. So many of them have invested in buildings, and now they're not able to use any of the money for that. I don't look at that as a win. Implementing Justin Trudeau's socialist daycare system and squeezing out the private daycare operators that vote for us looks to me like a step backwards. And it's exactly the reason why we have to draw a hard line, say our jurisdiction is our jurisdiction under the Constitution, and stay out of our lane.
Right.
That's what the Sovereignty Act would do.
Smith. You'll get to bring up the rest here. All right, audience, let's not start again. Let's not start, folks. Come on. We got a lot to get through tonight. Every time we do this, I've got to stop and turn around. So let's just dial it back for a minute, all right? Okay, 4 minutes, open debate. Ms. Schultz, we'll start with you.
I mean, I would say this, when it comes to childcare, we have private operators every single day that are grateful that we kept their businesses open and included in this plan. We also, an article in the Financial Post, if we want to quote the media, highlighting private operators from other provinces right across this country saying that they wish we had a fair deal. What would you have done, Ms. Smith? Leave out Alberta parents and families? Right, what you're doing right now is writing checks you can't cash and making promises you can't keep. That Sovereignty Act that you are running on, Ms. Smith, is a great fear for our energy industry. They think that creating chaos is going to create additional investment uncertainty. It's going to drive Albertans' investment, jobs out of this province. That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of additional economic uncertainty and additional economic crisis and constitutional crisis 6 months before an election, which will in fact deliver us an NDP government. That is what has our industry worried. They want us to sit down and have smart negotiations. You said it yourself. They are leaders in environmental emissions. We need to back them up.
Ottawa's created the chaos. I sent out an FAQ. I encourage Rebecca to read it about what the Sovereignty Act would say. It would say, given that the Constitution recognizes 92, 92A, 93, 94, 95 are our areas of jurisdiction, and given that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms obligates us to protect the rights and freedoms of our citizens, therefore we will not enforce any federal policy that violates Alberta's constitutional rights or the rights of our citizens. It actually imposes lawfulness on a lawless Ottawa. Ottawa is the one who started the constitutional war with us. When they told us in November of 2015 that we would not be allowed to sell our products in the open market with Bill C-48 and Bill C-69. And we've been trying to play footsie. We've been trying to get social license. We've been writing stern letters. We've been going to the court.
That's actually
Nothing
not true
has
at all.
worked.
When it comes to Bill
Nothing has worked.
C-69, there are 9 other provinces in this country that are standing up and supporting Alberta in that fight. And that's why I am confident in that system. We absolutely have to stand up and defend Alberta's rights. And I will say there are aspects of the Sovereignty Act that do make sense. Aspects of an overall bill in which other pieces of that bill encourage breaking the rule of law, which is something else that many Albertans, especially newcomers to this country, are fearful of. That is not something that Albertans want to see. We want to see that rule of law upheld. We are going to fight. That doesn't mean sitting back and taking a backseat to Justin Trudeau. We absolutely need to continue to take steps. And I would argue Albertans, yes, I understand. They want us to see that action happen faster. And we should do that faster, looking into tax points and credits. And also, I would say pushing forward on an Alberta pension plan. But we also have to put that to Albertans to make the case. And it is a good one, where we have high average incomes, a young population, we have low unemployment rates. That absolutely makes sense. Let's move. Let's move fast.
Section 95 of the Constitution gives us the first right to make rules regarding agriculture and the federal government from time to time. So I just wonder with Rebecca, if the federal government comes through with a 30% mandate to reduce fertilizer use among our farmers, are we just going to say, oh, golly gee, I wish you wouldn't do that? I'll tell you what I'd say. I'd say no. It violates Section 95 of our Constitution, which is our right, and we will not enforce that. We will make sure that our farmers have a steady supply of fertilizer so that we can feed the world, because food security is another issue that we're dealing with right now. I'm not going to sit and wait for Ottawa to create economic corridors for us. We're going to start building those so that we can get our products
and that is something that, I would actually absolutely agree with Danielle Smith on. And we see other provinces already fighting that fertilizer cap. That's an area where absolutely that makes sense. That is an area of provincial jurisdiction. That's a fight we can have, but we should be careful before making promises in other areas that we can't keep.
All right. Thank you very much for the open debate. All right. Okay. Mr. Lawton, we'll come to you. Miss it here. You have 45 seconds. You first, then Mr. Taves, then I'll come to you, Mr. Lawton.
Thank you so much. Albertans are leaders, and I'm Alberta's #1 fan. And if we want a legacy of rallying people up, we can certainly do that, or we can work collaboratively. And I just wanted to say to Ms. Smith, you've mentioned several sections out of the Constitution that you think that we can forward our agenda on, which I completely agree with, but then that would render your Sovereignty Act completely redundant. So I think we need to remove this action from all of the work that we're doing and actually work within the Constitution, what we have available to us. There's absolute ability to connect, negotiate, learn, and find wins, massive wins. Rebecca has found one. We've also worked on one with water, with respect to water infrastructure in Alberta, an $831 million infrastructure build in Alberta that we did in collaboration with the federal government.
All right, thank you. Mr. Taves, 45 seconds, over to you.
All right, here's the reality. It would be great to just wish away all our problems with this thing called the Sovereignty Act. We're delusional if we think that's going to happen. It simply will not. And this is my observation over the last few years. I tend to like to work collaboratively, but I've concluded with this federal government, we can't negotiate with them. We won't win if we just simply negotiate, but we'll win if we're strategic. My approach with Ottawa is to be assertive and strategic, because strategic we win, and I want to win for Albertans. The tired old approach, a lot of political rhetoric, over-promising and under-delivering, which is what the Sovereignty Act will do, will not get a win in Alberta's column. We need a strategic, thoughtful approach. That's how we win.
All right. Mr. Lawton, 45 seconds on the federal government.
Yes, thank you. Confederation is broken. We can't have any more strongly worded letters. We need to act. Asking hasn't worked. When we call, nobody answers. We need to start saying no to Ottawa. We have things like a pension plan and Alberta Constitution that we could do right now. Myself, I drove to Ottawa to fight those rules that Ottawa came down on that were hurting Albertans. I drove there to put my money where my mouth is and stand for Albertans and stand for people across this country. The federal government isn't going to stop, but neither am I. I won't stop fighting for Albertans.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. Don't make me remind you there's no applause. You all know the rules. All right. We've got Ms. Sani, 45 seconds to you, and then Mr. Jean, I'll come to you.
Thank you, Jeff. So there is nothing about the Sovereignty Act that makes sense. I've consulted with constitutional experts and lawyers, and it is going to be defeated in the courts. But while that is happening, investors who are thinking of coming to Alberta and putting some of their hard-earned capital into this province are going to be swayed. They are not going to come here. They're going to other jurisdictions. So I just want to be very clear about that. Alberta must fight back, absolutely. But we must not be risky and hot-headed. Now, Justin Trudeau relies on confrontation, polarization, wedging, and division. And at least one of my opponents here today thinks we should respond just like Trudeau. I don't think that way. I'm actually focused on solving real-world problems. And when we respond with anger, it feels good in the moment, but it's counterproductive.
I gotta cut you off there. All right. I know it's all hard to not finish the sentence. All right. Mr. Jean, over to you. And then Ms. Smith, I'll come to you again.
Thank you. 10 years as a member of Parliament, 10 years as a lawyer. Sovereignty Act can't work, folks. It's fiscal fairy tale. It is not going to work. I agree with my friends here that we have to do something different. And the equalization referendum, that started as a result of my Wild Rose leadership. We brought that in. And I will tell you that step one is acting on the amazing mandate that Albertans gave us in the referendum, 62%. We can force Canada to the constitutional negotiation table. All these sections of the Constitution, well, try section 46. That's where you give legal notice to the rest of the country that you are not happy with the situation because you have received a mandate from the people. Without a mandate from the people, it cannot happen. There is a process involved, and we are on that process. We need a leader that believes in it. That's why I brought it out years ago, because I believe in that focus. We need to do it now.
All right, that's 45 seconds, Mr. Jean. Thank you. Ms. Smith, I saw your paddle up. You wanted to weigh in here at the end. 45 seconds, over to you.
One of the last interviews I did on the air was with a scholar by the name of Jermaine Belzile from the Montreal Economic Institute. And I asked him the question, why does Quebec hate us so much? And he said, Quebec doesn't hate you. They just don't think about you at all. They're too busy thinking about themselves. And I think you should think about yourselves for a change. And I've been thinking about that a lot. And it's the reason why I've adopted the Alberta Sovereignty Act, because it puts Ottawa on notice that, yes, it just restates what's in the Constitution and the Charter, but it says we are drawing a hard line. And you know when the last time this action was taken? When the Emergencies Act came through in Quebec. Look what Quebec did. They convened their National Assembly, which as they called it, and they said, we will not enforce that. That is the kind of thing that Quebec has already done. That is the kind of thing we absolutely can do, and the thing that we must do.
All right, that's 45 seconds. All right, hot topic, I suppose. You all have waters below you, by the way, if you need to fill up. Now's a good time while I get into question 5. Is it here? Question 5 is for you. The question is on energy and diversifying our economy. Alberta's future depends on being driven by economics and job creation. The word opportunity is synonymous with Alberta, as our environment is ideal for growth and prosperity. Diversification across the province is happening, but must continue at an accelerated pace. While energy is certainly the backbone of our economy, it should not hold us back from leading in new opportunities for growth in other sectors. How would you, as leader, continue to attract and diversify industry across our province and address the significant talent shortage that many sectors are facing today? And I want specifics, please.
Thank you so much. And thank you for this amazing opportunity to speak about a sector that is so meaningful to so many of us. The energy sector and diversification is part of our family. It's part of who we are. When you think about those who are drilling, those who are doing the work, the manufacturing, the pipeline builds, all of the work that goes on in this province, whether that's diversification in plastics, there's so many things. I'm going to talk anecdotally a little bit about that in just a moment. But families live right across the streets from where they are drilling. They care about their earth, air, and water. And this is an alignment between the environment and between energy and the incredible resource stewardship that we have in this province and our ability to actually market that. We have a global responsibility to get our energy not only to Canada, but to the rest of the world. We have burgeoning economic populations all over the world that are seeking cheap energy like we have. We have access to being able to just flip on a switch, to be able to go and turn on a light to heat our homes. Imagine what is possible if we're able to work collectively with governments across Canada to get our energy to these burgeoning economies where middle classes are coming out of the woodwork and then be able to attract people to our province. Our province has attracted hundreds of thousands of people because of the energy that we bring forward. When we look at the powers of Indigenous growth in this sector, the way that Indigenous peoples are contributing to pipeline structures, to innovation in the energy sector, leading towards emissions and fueling the economy and exponential growth in clean energy. We have such talent and innovation in carbon capture strategies and new resources, geothermal, mine tailing, sailing from depleted resources. The opportunities are endless, but also to be able to encourage those new skills that align with the environment and with our energy, to be able to look at that, exposing that talent. And
All right,
Alberta
that's
is
2 minutes.
poised
I'm
to
going to
lead.
cut you off there.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Ahir, who would you like to debate on the topic?
I would like to debate Rajan Sani, please.
All right, Ms. Sani, I will read the question again. You'll have a minute and a half. How would you, as leader, continue to attract and diversify industry across our province and address the significant talent shortage that many sectors are facing today? And specifics, please.
Absolutely. Well, I think everybody knows that I love talking about energy, but now I'm going to talk about agriculture. We know that there is a food insecurity issue. Look what's happening in Ukraine. Their level of wheat production has drastically declined, and the situation is very serious. But here in Alberta, we have everything that we need to create agri-food corridors. I talked about natural trade corridor funds and trying to get some of that funding to develop highways. Can you imagine if we had a highway from Fort McMurray to Peace River, how much investment that would open up? That's critical infrastructure. I was also at a pea processing plant at the opening of it not too long ago, and that is another idea. We can actually do value add here in our province to supply nutritious foods all across the globe. Now, I'm just looking at the time, so we talked about labor shortages. Labor shortages are a significant issue in every sector of our economy. Whether you're a trucker or you own a small business or you're a restaurant operator, it's very, very difficult to get qualified and skilled staff. So Quebec has more autonomy over their immigration. When we talk about autonomy and independence, these are the kind of ideas that we need to pursue. How can we get more qualified skilled labor through the immigration system into Alberta so we can actually grow our economy? We cannot grow unless we have talent and skilled talent. So there are a number of ideas around this particular file that I'd love to share with you in the future.
All right, I'm going to cut you off there. 4 minutes of open debate. Kick us off, Ms. Ahir.
Thank you so much. Well, skilled labor, this is a perfect example of exactly what needs to happen in Alberta. We are actually probably the biggest barrier to that skilled labor being able to come into our province because of the red tape and not allowing people with professional designations to actually pursue the jobs that they were intended to do. My father's perfect example. In 1962, he came in here as an engineer. And not only did he have to redo all of his education, but apply because the university that he came from was not accepted here in Alberta and in Canada. So if you look at all of those opportunities to be able to make sure that we remove barriers for new talent to be able to come in, we want to attract all of the talent from all over the world and steal that talent into our province. We're a teeny tiny province, 4.3 million people. We need to grow. By 2030, we could be as many as 6 million or 7 million people. We need to make sure that we have our systems in place, not only to attract that talent, but also, Rajan was talking about agriculture. Food security is one piece of it, but think about agriculture from the aspect of energy and what they're producing with respect to that.
All right, jump in here, Ms. Sani.
I would absolutely agree that credentialing is critically important. We all have stories. I have stories of relatives who were very, very qualified and could not find their place in the labor market here in Alberta so that they could actualize their potential. There is tremendous potential. So one of the things that I plan to do as Premier is to speed up the credentialing process. We have a healthcare workers shortage in this province. We've got a shiny new hospital in Grand Prairie that doesn't have doctors and it's short of nurses. It's a travesty. So credentialing is something that we do need to speed up. And of course, as we talk about labor shortages, there are other sectors that we need to support as well. But I want to go back to the question.
All right, let's see what Ms. Ahir has to say.
Well, I just wanted to add to what Rajan was saying, and I want to give a shout out to Medicine Hat actually right now, because right here in this awesome city, you guys started a hydrogen task force in, I believe it was in 2021. That hydrogen task force has taken light and has grown with the government and the opportunities to see what zero emissions would look like. Every single large company, corporation, energy company is looking at zero emissions right now. It is an environment and energy collective that we do together to show our responsible development. We have to make sure it's not just about Alberta, folks. We have to make sure that places like the UK are not calling us dirty oil, that places like other countries in the world are not looking at us as not even an opportunity to be able to get our products to them. We have to make sure that we're using what we have available to us.
I appreciate all these comments, wonderful comments, but I just want to get back to the question on diversification. I was talking about agriculture and some of the key messages that I'm hearing from farmers. By the way, we have the most sophisticated and smartest farmers here in Alberta in the world. I'm not from a farming background, but I hear that all the time. Some of the key issues that they're having are around water. Water is an issue for economic growth, and it's certainly an issue for farmers. They have issues around electricity. And they also have issues, as I had mentioned before, around agri-food corridors. We need to invest in our highways and we need to invest in our road system so some of that product can actually be delivered to markets.
Rajan, I'd like to speak about water a little bit. One of the biggest issues that we've had is the government not investing enough into water and pivots into areas in order to create arable fields in Alberta in order to have irrigation available. Pivots are a very, very difficult thing to come by right now because of the way that the world is working and the markets are going. However, if we're actually talking about water consumption, when we use pivots in agricultural areas, we actually reduce water consumption by almost 80%.
All right, that ends our 4 minutes of open debate time. Okay, Ms. Smith, I'm going to come to you for 45 seconds.
I'm okay.
You're going to hold off? All right. Anybody else? I just want to say, Mr. Taves and Ms. Atir, you only have one remaining rebuttal left. So just to remind you, Ms. Schultz, you want to go 45 seconds?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to just touch on a couple of things as well. You know, when we're talking about obviously energy of today, yes, we need to attract and retain the highly skilled workers we have. And I do want to thank all of the energy workers across our province that obviously give us access to safe, reliable energy. We also have to start talking about energy of the future. CO2, hydrogen, we got to keep talking about LNG. This is the energy of the future. This is what will help keep some of our best and brightest minds right here in Alberta. Yes, we have to speed up credentialing. Yes, we have to take more ownership over our immigration. But the other thing we have to do is cut through some of the bureaucracy, whether it's talking about nuclear or ag. When I ask people who's leading, oftentimes they say it's not us because our bureaucrats are still working on the org charts and the other provinces are hustling investment.
All right. Thank you. All right. That ends question 5. Question 6, we're going to move on here quickly to Mr. Taves. It's for you. The question is on unity and leadership. At regional levels around the globe, conservative movements have faced internal struggles to maintain a thoughtful Big Tent approach. There's no secret that many here on this stage have been early adopters of unity, yet have struggled to bring people together in an effective way. The topic of unity is one of great importance to the membership, as many feel the infighting must stop or it will lead to another harmful NDP government. In a world of division, intolerance, and lack of understanding, how will you, as leader, unite the party and move our province forward for the benefit of all Albertans? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Jeff. I think this is the most important question of the evening because consistent with my opening comments, unity is mission critical for this movement because if we're not united, we will not beat Rachel Notley in 2023. And friends, leadership matters when it comes to unity. It's absolutely critical. You know, I've been in the private sector right until 2019. But even when I was Minister of Finance, I drew on some of my experience that I'd gained in the private sector in past leadership roles. You know, whether it was leading our business teams or whether it was during the time that I served as president of the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, a time post-BSE, when there was significant loss, emotion, and division. I had to hold disparate provincial members together, all wanting to go their own way, all wanting to do their own thing. And had we lost those provincial members, we would have lost the war. You know, it's right now we're in not a dissimilar time in this conservative movement. And that has informed, my previous experience has informed my approach. As a leader, I take a collaborative approach. Every voice around the table matters. You know, when every voice has an opportunity to speak, we make better decisions. That's absolutely essential. And friends, every MLA needs a full opportunity to bring the views of their constituents to the table. That's absolutely critical. That's how Albertans are heard, very often through their MLA. And when MLAs don't have that opportunity, aberrant behavior occurs. Unity is critical, but to get there, we need strong, principled, and friends, proven leadership. The type of leadership that I provided in the finance ministry as I delivered on the objectives of fiscal responsibility, bringing the province to a balanced budget and positioning this economy to lead the nation in economic growth this year and next.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Taves. Who would you like to debate on the topic of unity?
Let's go with Brian Jean.
All right, Mr. Jean, you have a minute, 30 seconds. Over to you.
Finally, the debate moves to the right. Usually, you shouldn't need to talk about a potential premier's leadership and promote unity. That shouldn't be necessary. That a premier should know how to manage caucus and their staff should be a necessary item for success. But we have not been good at this. As Conservatives, we haven't. You promote unity by how you treat people, by doing the right things in the right way. A leader must treat Albertans, the grassroots, the caucus, and the cabinet with respect. That means listening to them, and I'm a good listener. I have a track record of leading organizations and businesses. I have almost 15 years of elected experience and over a decade practicing law. I have led a caucus, organized a unity effort,
Hey, I am just letting you know here that this is with the UCP stream. Now, this is an ongoing problem. They are supposedly trying to work through it here. I know there are people in the comments that are saying, you know, why are you not putting the stream out the way it should be? And I would say that we're putting it out exactly as we're getting it. We're trying to see if they are going to rectify this problem. Early on, apparently we heard from one source connected to the party, they had to reset their router. So this is a debate happening in rural Alberta and Medicine Hat. I think it is unfrozen now. Let's go back to the debate in progress.
"15 years of elected experience and over a decade practicing law. I have led a caucus, organized a unity effort,
Hey, so apparently there is now a stream unavailable. So the entire stream has died now. This is what happens when you try to do a live event. Let's just get a little bit of our analysis going as the debate continues. Now, we don't even know if the debate has actually continued or if they've stopped it there. We'll try to get an update from our correspondent, Rachel Emmanuel, in just a moment. But right now, there is no debate to go to right now. The UCP feed has completely died. So let's chime in with some early, we don't often get to do a halftime show on this. We're a little over halftime. My colleague from True North, William McBeath, is with us. William, let's just start early with what we were seeing here, which is that, as you and I discussed, this was really the Danielle Smith show in a lot of ways. All of the candidates were, it seemed like, choosing to go after Danielle Smith, choosing to put their questions to her, their accusations to her, and all of that. But the result, if I think of what happened, is just that, wow, I've just heard a lot of Danielle Smith today. It didn't even seem like anyone really landed a knockout blow on her for all of this.
No, I think you're right. And at the beginning of this debate, if I thought it would be Rachel Emmanuel and Danielle Smith back and forth, no, I wouldn't have thought that. But, certainly at the beginning that it would be an opportunity for the other candidates to take an attack against the front runner. That's a good strategy. I don't know. One thing I think people have seen from Danielle tonight is she's been in many debates in her time. She debated in a provincial leaders debate with Brian Mason way back in the day. And you saw that, and not to mention, by the way, hosting a radio for many, many years. All of those skills on display tonight, and I don't know if the decision that's to give her so much airtime was an actually good idea.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, William. We'll check back in with you in a couple of moments. I think we're having some internet issues on your end too, so maybe you and the UCP might share an internet service provider. But thanks for chiming in with that. We will pop back in with you very shortly. Let's go to my colleague, Elie Cantin-Nantel, on this. I know you have been monitoring, Elie, Elie has been monitoring the social media reaction to this. And I'm going to ask him when he joins us to filter out the people complaining about the UCP live stream and focus on the substance and content here. But what is it that people have really been focusing in on from what you've analyzed here?
Sure. So first of all, we were kind of cut out at first, and I would say really before this debate started, the biggest issue seemed to be COVID, and people were as we had said earlier, the pastors, the lockdowns, that seems to be an issue. Really, what has taken center stage of this debate, and I've seen chatter online, is the Alberta Sovereignty Act. So I actually went and I asked my Twitter followers, what do you think of the Alberta Sovereignty Act? And a lot of them seem to have a pretty positive response about it. There was one tweet that I thought was pretty interesting. It was from Aidan. He said, "I've heard more about how terrible the Sovereignty Act is compared to from these candidates versus Danielle Smith talking about it." So there are a lot of them are talking about this Sovereignty Act. A lot of people say, what else can we do? Because Ottawa is mistreating Alberta so badly. One here from Twitter user Mountain Man, "I just want to live my Alberta life without Ottawa." So it's clear that Albertans are clearly very frustrated with the way that they've been treated by the Trudeau government and other governments in the past. I remember when I was in Alberta working there, the Trudeau Senior, Trudeau Junior, there's this legacy with the Trudeaus and how they were being mistreated. So I think an idea like the Sovereignty Act, even if there's legalities and questions around it, I think it's very popular with the base, the grassroots, that they're just fed up and they want something different. They want something new. Especially
hang on, I got to cut you off there, Elie. It sounds like the debate stream is back, so we're going to cut immediately back to Medicine Hat for the UCP leadership debate.
My colleagues, including our local MLA Fry. My friends, this comes down to a few things: discipline, teamwork, loyalty. These things mattered. They mattered in 2012, they mattered in 2015, and they will matter in 2023. We absolutely have to pull together. It starts with our team. It starts with making sure that our caucus, who represent the diverse voices of Albertans, are the main decision makers in government. We can't do things the same way we've done them. Not in the last 3 years, where some voices are heard louder than others, and there's different sets of rules for different people. I made that commitment to my caucus colleagues of how we're going to do things different and what they can expect in me as part of this amazing team.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lawton.
Thank you. There's no question that unity is vital for success, but we need to rebuild the trust of Albertans and the members of the party. Now, I said what was true when there was a price for saying it, and those in cabinet said nothing. Mr. Taves, you said you unequivocally supported the Premier, and I never once heard you in caucus speaking against the Premier or any of the actions that were happening in government. Jason Kenney's record is your record. I stood up. I did what everybody seems to call the tough thing. So I am that leader because my loyalty is to the constituents that I represent and to Albertans.
All right.
Jeff.
Well, thank you. Oh, great. Mr. Taves, you have one more. So this is your last one.
No, I was called out on that one.
All right. Okay. I'll give you 30 seconds.
All right. I just simply need to respond to Todd's assertion there, because here was where I spoke out. I was around that cabinet table, and that's where I spoke out. I represented the views of my constituents, rural Alberta, and I represented the views of Todd's constituents while I was there around the table, making a difference instead of standing on the outside sniping. Again, real leadership is not cutting and running. Real leadership is serving under the burden of leadership at a time when there's much pressure and bringing the views of constituents forward to ensure they were heard. That's what I did, and I'm proud of delivering that kind of a voice to my constituents.
All right. Thank you. Okay. We're going to move on to our last question of the night. And so as far as 45-second paddles go, Mr. Taves, you have one. Ms. Smith, you have one. Ms. Sani, you have one. And Mr. Jean, you have one. All right. The rest of you have used up all your time. So hopefully you get called out. All right. The question for you, Mr. Jean, is on provincial surplus. Many Albertans are tired of expensive bureaucratic roadblocks that prevent things from getting done efficiently. Value for money means creating returns we can all benefit from. With record surpluses on the horizon driven by high commodity prices and a growing economy, coupled with an increased cost of living, many feel a reduction in taxes is appropriate at this time. Others believe that a significant reinvestment into the Heritage Savings Fund, or our rainy day fund, is more appropriate. Specifically, how do you, as leader, plan to balance savings versus investing in order to maintain long-term value and sustainability for Albertans while meeting the demands of a growing population? You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you. This isn't complicated. In an age of increasing interest rates, you have to use the surpluses to pay down debt as it becomes due. The last thing we should do is roll over any old debt to new higher interest rates, because we've seen what's going on, and we know ultimately, if we've lived through the 80s as I did, what can happen if you have high interest rates. You have a lot of people that are very uncomfortable, and many people going bankrupt. The good news is that our debt will be coming due slowly, just over the next decade, and our financial circumstances have changed because so many royalty-paying oil projects are actually at full payout. About 80% of all oil sands projects are now paying full royalties. That's great news. That means we have the largest surpluses we will probably ever see. We should save those surpluses, pay down debt as it becomes due. In the meantime, we should use the income from those surpluses to actually reduce the cost of transmission and distribution charges to families in Alberta. I'm telling you this, I'm not going to reduce taxes on businesses, that's for sure. In the long run, as we retire more and more debt, we should look at using the surpluses to pay for other things. That will reduce Albertans' costs. The day-to-day costs for consumers, the day-to-day costs for you, because that's what we need to do right now. We don't need new government projects. We need to run and manage government better. We need to be a boring government that you forget is there, because they're not in your way. They get out of your way and remove the obstacles from your way. We have to avoid the old trap of making our government so expensive in good times that we can't afford it in bad times. I've seen it in Fort McMurray. And folks, we're very poor in infrastructure right across the province, and especially there. We need to do whatever we can do in order to make sure that we take those surpluses, pay off debt, and support people that can't afford to live right now because of inflation. Private sector economists actually suggested that our surpluses could be $15 billion a year for the next 3, 4, 5 years. According to the government website, we have almost $5 billion in bonds coming due this year, about $3 billion next year, and the year after that, more than $50 billion of our bonds are not due until 2030. So we can use that to
All right,
support
Mr. Jean, I got to cut you off there. But I will ask you who you'd like to debate on this topic.
Mr. Taves.
All right, Mr. Taves, minute and a half, over to you.
All right, good. Thanks, Jeff. Certainly my thoughts around the surplus, I'm going to predicate my comments with this. When I presented Budget 2022, I was clear with Albertans. Any surplus up to the earnings level in the Heritage Savings Trust Fund I would categorically reinvest in that Heritage Savings Trust Fund. The first thing we'll do is stop robbing that trust fund from future generations. But as we take a look beyond there, I do agree that we need to pay attention to our debt. We have $93 billion in taxpayer-supported debt in this province, and it will be coming due over the next number of years. Here's what we need to do with surpluses. Ensure we're setting cash aside to pay that debt off as it matures, because if we don't, we could well have to go into capital markets with a cost of capital perhaps double than what the cost is for the debt that's been currently placed. That would double our debt service costs. We are projecting about $2.6 billion in debt service costs right now in this budget. If we double those, that's $5 billion. That comes right out of program spending or would require a tax increase. Friends, fiscal discipline will remain important. We can't make irresponsible decisions during the good years that will put us in trouble during the poor years. Again, reinvest any surplus up to the earnings of the Heritage Savings Trust Fund in that trust fund, set cash aside to pay down debt as it matures.
All right, well, thank you. Okay, that opens 4 minutes of debate. Mr. Jean, kick us off.
Well, I want to point out and highlight Mr. Taves and our policy. It's very similar. That's why I believe that Mr. Taves would be a great finance minister in a Brian Jean-led government. I do, folks. He's had 3 years of experience. He's been a good finance minister, and I think we can make him great if we work together as a team. But Tavis, I really want to know, isn't it true that government spending increased a lot since 2019? We've seen that. We know that's happened, but I'd like you to explain to Albertans exactly what took place, and that the wage settlements that you gave to our public sector unions, of course, after you started negotiating, sometime after you started negotiating, were actually larger than the ones the NDP gave them from 2015 to 2018. And that does bother me. And I think that we have to look at that because, folks, with inflation now, we're going to be able to catch up. But the truth is we have to make the decisions at the time based on the history and where we are at that time. And frankly, I don't think we can look at catering to the unions every time they come to the door and start knocking. And in fact, they're going to start knocking a lot.
I'd like to respond to that.
Please.
Because further to the question, what did we do in terms of spending? Now, one direction that I gave my department when we started dealing with all the additional pressures of COVID the last 2 years, knowing that our healthcare costs were going to go up specifically because of a lot of personal protective equipment and other healthcare policies. I asked my department to break out those expenditures. In other words, don't include them in our regular operating expenditures for 2 reasons. Number one, we can't know the progress we're making or not. Number two, I was concerned that department heads would want to build that extra spending into baseline budgets. So our basic operating expenditures, the cost to deliver government services, we actually kept flat for the first 3 years. And that was no small feat because we inherited an upward trajectory of 4% per year. Friends, if we would have continued with the spending trajectory we inherited from the NDP and the previous PC government, we wouldn't have been projecting a $500 million surplus in this fiscal year. It would be a $6 billion deficit.
Isn't that a great way to see a team working together, folks? This is a team up here. We're all friends, or want to be friends, and we soon will be because most of us will be working together, and hopefully we'll get somebody elected, and then we'll be able to go back and take over the province because this can't happen unless we work together. Can't happen unless we have great ideas, and that's why all these people are up here today to give great ideas. But they do need a leader, folks. And they need a leader that has experience dealing with Ottawa, a leader that has experience dealing with the Constitution and courts, a leader that has been a leader before, and that is me.
I would like to just make a couple of comments on the public sector, because those were, we need to talk about the public sector. Shortly after I was tapped to be Minister of Finance, and it's certainly been a privilege to serve Albertans as their Minister of Finance over the last 3 years. I found out what I believed to be true. And that was we had a bloated public sector. We had a bloated public service. And so I worked with other ministers, other ministries at the time, and we thoughtfully, carefully, and I would suggest compassionately, reduced the size of the public service, friends, by 8% in the last 2 years. We've gone a long ways to right-sizing government, right-sizing the public service. And yes, we did get a collective bargaining agreement with virtually all of our public sector partners. And here were the objectives that I had. Number one, we had fiscal objectives to ensure that Alberta was not an outlier in remuneration relative to other provinces.
I actually want to hear that, but I just want to say that running out of time, folks, and I do want to hear that. We'll have a conversation afterwards because I do want to hear that. That's innovative. But the truth is, what we need to do is we need to open up the Constitution, folks. We do. And I know you see that as a site out there that can't be attained. It can be. The Constitution, the Supreme Court of Canada has laid it out. And without that, we're not going to be able to deal with our issues of money and fiscal balance or healthcare.
I have to say, our collective bargaining agreements met our fiscal objectives.
Okay, we're done, folks. Just a quick side. So that was a great debate. Unfortunately, the screen dropped on us twice on the digital feed. However, I have been told we have a clean copy of this recording, and that will be posted to the website. So everybody else across the province, if you missed it, we apologize. I'm not in charge of the technology. I'm sorry. But we will have a clean recording, so you will be able to get that. In terms of 45-second rebuttals, I have Ms. Sawney, Ms. Smith. Anybody else? Mr. Lowen? Okay, Ms. Smith, Mr. Lowen. All right. And Mr. Taves, you still have one rebuttal you can use in this somewhere. And Mr. Jean, you actually have two, but you can't use them back to back.
That's okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Sawney.
Thank you, Jeff. And folks, I fear for where our country is headed, which is why we need serious and stable leadership, not risky and hot-headed ideas. And that's why when it comes to the provincial surplus, I'm an economist. I know how to do forward planning. We must absolutely pay down debt. We must absolutely put some funds into the Heritage Savings Trust Fund. And we must strategically invest and target an investment in infrastructure. I had talked about infrastructure earlier, health and education. But I had also mentioned that when governments can help, they should. There are many people in this province who are hurting, who cannot make their grocery bills. And that is why I had talked about indexing seniors benefits, AISH benefits, and income tax brackets.
All right. Ms. Smith, you have 45 seconds.
Some of my friends on the stage here have been digging up old columns. I wish they dug up the column from 2001 when I wrote about how we could grow our sovereign wealth fund to a significant level. When I look at why I'm a conservative, I look back on the history with Peter Lougheed setting aside 30% of our resource revenues. And then when Klein took over, how he made us debt-free. That's part of my conservative identity. And then, of course, with Premier Stelmach, when he came in and did a major investment in infrastructure. Those are the three things that I think are the most important for us to do right now. I would like to see us set aside a dedicated portion every single year so we can grow that Alberta Sovereign Wealth Fund to a significant level where we can start reducing taxes. We just have to get started now. And I think that that is a policy that I look forward to discussing.
Let's move on to Mr. Lowen. Mr. Lowen, you have 45 seconds.
Yes, thank you. Government is very bad at predicting cyclical cycles when it comes to booms and busts. As a result, we see overspending when times are good, and we see debt when times are bad. And I believe the government needs to develop a legislated plan for how to handle surpluses, and I believe that should be paying down debt. We have enormous debt in Alberta. We have a huge interest that is costing taxpayers billions of dollars each year, and that needs to be spent on the services for Albertans instead of banks and bondholders. So obviously we could be doing more by reducing income tax for average Albertans and raise the basic personal exemption so that'll affect all Albertans' income.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lowen. Okay, Mr. Jean, 45 seconds. Then I'll come to you, Mr. Taves.
There's two people on the stage that still haven't talked about PST and why they thought about putting it in and why they talked about putting it in. And more than that, I'm interested about why they changed their mind, because tax does have a lot to do with people's ability to pay things. And having a consumer tax means that a lot of people are going to have their costs increased. And that's why I think it's so important to talk about what people do want. They don't want tax credits that you might get back after you spent the money a year later. They don't want tax credits that, you know, are $1,000 and may give you $300. They don't want that. What they want is they want their costs lowered on a daily basis. They want to see their gas less expensive. That's why I've suggested a permanent reduction of 30 cents a liter at the gas prices today. That's why I've suggested a third off their transmission and distribution charges.
All right.
Those things help people on a day-to-day basis.
There, and we're going to go to Mr. Taves.
All right, there's only one person again on this stage that I'm aware of that has talked about implementing a PST and raising taxes on Albertans by $5 billion as recently as about 20 months ago. And that's my leadership colleague, hopeful colleague here, Ms. Danielle Smith. I have never suggested a PST. In fact, again, if you want to see what I would do fiscally and economically as Premier, look at what I've done as the Minister of Finance. I lowered taxes. Which resulted in expanded fiscal capacity, and expanded government revenues. We brought fiscal discipline to government spending. That combination gave me the privilege of presenting the first balanced budget in over a decade. Gone are the days when we rob from our children.
All right. Ms. Smith, you were called out there. I'm going to give you 45 seconds.
You know, I thought I answered this because the context that I wrote the column, and that's kind of what you do when you're in the media, is that you write columns on topical issues and try to find solutions. It was when we had a $24 billion deficit. Now, I guess there's only two options. Either the stories are untrue, where it was saying that Travis Davis was floating the idea of a provincial sales tax, or he was just going to wait, I guess, until oil and gas revenues bailed us out. And that's kind of what's happened. We now have $16 billion worth of resource revenue, spending almost all of it. We got to do a better job stewarding that for the future.
All right. Okay. Mr. Jean, you have one last paddle. Who keeps doing
One last paddle. Well, I'm very interested in what takes 42% of our tax dollars and 42% of everyone's tax dollars, and that's healthcare. We need to spend a little bit better on that and get better investments. It's not about the money, it's about the outcomes. It's about making sure that people receive not just less expensive goods as they travel, and that's why I reduce gas, because that reduces groceries, it reduces appliances, it reduces everything that we get pretty much in Alberta. We need leadership to drive change. We need better management, better executive decisions, better decisions. Leadership is not about great talkers. It's about making good decisions and having a track record of good decisions, or having bad decisions as a track record. I need to hear from Danielle Smith to commit today that you won't give bad medical advice or cancer advice again, because you hurt a lot of people with what you said, and you still said it was a misunderstanding. You haven't taken it back. A misunderstanding is not what it is.
45 seconds is over. 45 seconds is over, and we've been over this topic. All right. We're going to end a little bit late anyway, so we're not going to get back into it, and maybe that's something for a closing statement. Ms. Smith, I don't want to get back into it because Mr. Taves was called out. You were called out.
No, I don't want to get back into it. I just want to tell Brian.
Let's move on. You can deal with it in your closing statement.
No, I just want to tell Brian I'm sorry for the loss of his son. And
all right, Ms. Smith, I'm going to stop you.
I've heard the story, and it's heart-wrenching, and I know exactly how he feels because my family member.
I think we all understand, and you can address that in your closing statements, which I'm now going to give everybody 2 minutes to do because we do have a little bit of extra time. All right, this has been drawn at random, and that's how we're going to close tonight. And Ms. Schultz, you will kick us off with 2 minutes. Please go ahead with your closing.
Thank you. 9 months from right now, the question Albertans will be asking themselves is, who do we trust? Who do we trust to drive our economic growth? Who do we trust to transform healthcare and education? Who do we trust, based on their record, to take on Justin Trudeau? So as a party, who do we trust to ensure the NDP never sees government again? Trust is built over time. A few candidates on this stage, they have records of their own. We absolutely cannot go backwards or stick to the status quo. We need a leader not just for the next year to get us through the next election. We need a leader who can take us into the next generation of our conservative movement by bringing Albertans along with a vision of the future. A vision for jobs and economy, yes, not leaving our children, my children, yours, with debt so that they can't meet the demands of their time because they're paying off the choices made in ours. We know that, but we also need a vision of hope and optimism and opportunity and a plan for our future. I will lead a party that you, Albertans, party members, can be proud to vote for. So I ask again, in May 2023, who do you want to see running against Rachel Notley and the NDP? I am asking you for your vote as I run to be the leader of the United Conservative Party, a party and a team that I am proud of and proud to run alongside, and as I ask for your support to be the next Premier of this amazing province of Alberta.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz. All right, Ms. Ahir, sorry. You have 2 minutes.
You're right. We do need to build trust. That is the work that is being done right now, to get in front of you, to engage with you, to give you something that you deserve, a government that is accountable and honorable, not something that you should ask for. It is positive and empowering campaign that is going to build a government that you can be so proud of. And I'm very proud to stand with my colleagues here on the stage. But I want you to understand that this is not about me. This is truly about Albertans, and we cannot use ideology or personal agenda to get there. Those who just arrived yesterday, to homesteaders, First Nations, no matter who you love or who you pray to, This province is welcoming and amazing, and we have to grow our population. We are looking for governments that will have a strong team, empathy, and insistence on customer service, education, and healthcare, and working constructively on all levels of government to show a capacity to learn and to grow. And we will listen, and we will collaborate, and we will lead with humanity, and we will look at a shift in the culture that will actually bring us forward. So it's not just about winning in 2023. You win in 2023. We lead together. Leadership is not about being at the top. It is this collective wave of energy and strength and all of the people that build this amazing province, this tapestry of culture. It's not about division, it's about building. If we benchmark our budgets against population growth and inflation in the last balanced budget, and each year use that guidance to inform our spending, we get off that tax and spend roller coaster. We have stable budgeting, long-term planning, and it enables savings of our resources. And we grow the Heritage Fund, and we protect our services, and we reduce inflation, and we maintain low taxation, and pay down the debt prudently. This is the plan that will bring us forward, and I would be honored to be your leader. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Ahir. All right, Ms. Sani, over to you. 2 minutes for closing.
Thank you. I have a question for all of you. Why do we do the things that we do? Why do we get up in the morning and go to work or make decisions about how to spend our days? We do it for our children, our families, and our communities. And that is why I got into politics in the first place, for my children and family, and for your children and families. And folks, I have already mentioned several times today that Canada is going down a dangerous path, led by destructive policies from the Trudeau Liberals. We can respond impulsively with anger. That would feel good, but it is risky. I have experienced the economic turmoil caused by unstable and unpredictable government. I talked about that today as well. The answer isn't to threaten sovereignty or separation. And I'm going to say something right now, and I want everyone to listen closely. A Danielle Smith victory today means a Rachel Notley victory tomorrow. There is a better way. Our UCP team
All right, let's
can
keep it
build
down, audience.
confidence
This is closing.
and resilience in Alberta. I've lived and worked in Alberta all my life, and I know the energy industry, and I know how to lead a team. We do have a choice. One choice is to roll the dice on risky and hot-headed ideas. But if we lose that gamble, the losers are Albertans. It's all of us. So in closing, what I would say to all Albertans who are listening right now on the live feed is please do make sure that you go out and purchase a membership. This election is consequential. It will determine the course that our province goes in for at least a decade. Don't be complacent. Don't be forgetful. Please do pick up your membership. And I would say, please do visit my website, voterogen.ca, to learn more about me. And don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to talk to you anytime,
All right, thank you, Ms. Sani.
anyplace.
Mr. Jean, over to you. 2 minutes to close.
Thank you for listening tonight. I agree with Rajan. I do have a 3.5-year-old and a 38-year-old, and I'm doing this for my kids, just like I'm doing it for your kids, and all of us are here. There are many good people on the stage. In fact, I would say great people, and there's many good people who want to lead our party and be part of our party, and we should be pleased with that. But I'm the only person right now that is talking about renewing the party and returning it to what it was meant to be, a party that represents the vast majority of Albertans. You, who want a conservative government that respects their autonomy in a realistic way. I want this party to make Albertans happier. That involves changing the way we treat each other and other Albertans. It means civility. It also means that we have to be honest when we make mistakes and apologize. I want this party to make Albertans healthier. That means working with our wonderful doctors and nurses and technologists to reform our healthcare system and make it the best in the world. I want to make Albertans freer. That means correcting the mistakes of the last 2 years and making sure that our rights are actually protected. And I want to make Albertans prosperous. That means fighting the Trudeau Liberals, fixing the Constitution, which we can do. It is reality. Growing and diversifying our economy and taking advantage of the can-do spirit of Albertans. If we do these things, we can and will renew our party and win the next election. If you believe in these things, If you want a better hope for the future for your children, for your grandchildren, then please consider voting for Brian Jean. I will prepare. I will have an excellent team around me and surrounding me, and I will listen. I will make sure that I always do what's best for Albertans, what's best for our future. I will make us the happiest, the healthiest, the most free and most prosperous people on the planet. Please go to brianjean.ca, buy a membership, support any one of these candidates, but get involved. Please. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jean. Ms. Smith, over to you. You have 2 minutes for your closing.
I just want to say that even though I think I should be leader, I must say I agree with Brian that every person on this stage has had an amazing input on cabinet decisions, and I think that every one of them is cabinet material. Todd, of course, has done amazing work standing up for the rights of individual MLAs. Rajan has done terrific work on transportation corridors. Rebecca has always got the interests of families at front and center with her activity tax credit. I think that's a great idea. We've got Leela, who I think has got some wonderful ideas she put on the table tonight about immigration. Travis has done terrific work on insurance. I mean, our energy industry now has the ability to self-insure, which is going to be hugely important in this world of disinvestment. And Brian Jean, I'm surprised he didn't talk about his gasoline and diesel proposal tonight to remove the royalties, because I think it's a pretty darn good idea as well. But I think we have to also be honest about why it is we're here this evening. We're here this evening because conservatives win elections when they talk and act like conservatives rather than a bunch of watered down liberals. Did you stop to think about why it is we're even here tonight? Why we're having this debate? Why we had a leadership opening? It's because the Premier and his team lost the confidence of members and of most MLAs. It's because our members saw a government that wasn't effective in dealing with Trudeau's attacks on our province, complaining, sending letters with no results. That, to me, is the central issue of this campaign, is who is going to stand up to Ottawa. I found it really interesting in a caucus communications that came out July 18th. This is UCP caucus. It says Alberta's government will not accept any plan from the federal government that seeks to interfere in our constitutionally protected ability to develop our resources. That's what MLAs are told to say. That kind of sounds like the Sovereignty Act. So I think what you're seeing here is just a little bit of posturing tonight, because I know that I'm going to fight for you. We're going to stand up to Ottawa. Go to daniellesmith.ca, buy a membership to put Alberta first.
Appreciate it, Ms. Smith. Thank you. Mr. Taves, 2 minutes over to you for closing remarks.
All right. It's really been a pleasure to join all of my leadership colleagues here on the stage tonight. Look, prior to 2019, I was in the private sector my whole life. And I have to say that during those years, I was a typical conservative-minded Albertan. My best day was the day I didn't notice government. I didn't notice government in my businesses, and certainly didn't notice government between me and my family. But it was when our province took a sharp left turn in 2015, and we elected in Alberta an NDP government. That's when I sat up and took note, because I was afraid, I was concerned that the opportunities and prosperity, the freedoms that we'd enjoyed may not be there for our children and grandchildren. And friends, again, I want to draw us to really the question, the pertinent question in this leadership race, and who is that leader that can bring us to victory in 2023? Because friends, that's why I got into politics in 2019, and it's because of that question I joined this leadership race only a few weeks ago. It's also about having real solutions to the challenges we face. We face real challenges around inflation and affordability. It's about having real solutions when we deal with a government in Ottawa who consistently attacks Alberta's vital economic interests. And friends, I am not about political bluster and rhetoric, over promising and under delivering. I'm about winning. And we win when we're strategic. But it's also about continuing to position this province for economic growth, diversification. And friends, we're seeing that growth and diversification right now at record rates across sectors. We cannot see the gains we've made eroded. Right now, we need strong, principled, proven leadership. I would ask for your support so we can win in 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Taves. All right, Mr. Lawton, you have the final 2 minutes for closing. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's been a great debate. I've enjoyed learning all sorts of ideas that have been expressed so far. And I want to give thanks, of course, to the organizers of this event. We know it takes a lot to put on a big event like this. And but what I want to do is I want to just look back at some of the comments made here. I think every single person at this table talked about restoring trust and unity, but no one seemed to talk about how it was lost. And I think that's important to think about. Losing trust doesn't just happen. It comes from broken promises. Now, some think that unity is kicking people out and then calling them representing their constituents sniping, but that's not true. We're here today because members spoke. Members wanted a change, and that's why we're here today. My campaign is focused on trust, transparency, and accountability. And I believe leading is serving. So this is your Alberta, and I'm committed to doing it your way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. All right, the candidate's closing remarks ends the official debate. It has been my privilege to be your moderator for this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please give the candidates a round of applause. All right. On behalf of all UCP party members, I want to thank all the candidates for being here tonight. I do know it's a lot of stress getting here, and I want to thank all of you. I also want to thank the party, specifically our party president, Cynthia Moore, and the entire UCP party team who helped put tonight on and make it possible. And a huge thanks to the people of Medicine Hat for hosting us here tonight. If you don't yet have your party membership to vote on October 6th, visit www.unitedconservatives.ca for more information. And as mentioned in my introductory remarks, the Medicine Hat debate is the first of 2 official debates. Please tune in to the next one in Edmonton on August 30th at the Citadel Theatre. Thank you, and good night, Alberta.
Oh my goodness, I was nodding off a little there. I think it might have been the question about, well, I think all of them actually for the first half of the debate. We are coming to you live. This is True North's coverage of what was a glitch-filled United Conservative Party debate as people square off in Medicine Hat, Alberta for who gets to be the next leader of the UCP, replacing Jason Kenney, but also who gets to be the next Premier of Alberta. And I was talking about this on my show the other day. It's very interesting when the stakes are a lot higher than they are, say, in the Conservative Party of Canada leadership race underway right now, that once you win this leadership race, you are the Premier of Alberta. So you are seeking re-election in the election coming up in 9 months' time, rather than just trying to seek election for the first time. And I think that actually is important because whoever comes in is going to have an existing caucus they'll have to manage heading into an election, which means they'll have to set a tone very quickly. They'll have to assemble a cabinet very quickly. And they're going to have to do this in a way that gives them enough momentum and puts them on solid enough footing that they are able to win an election in 9 months' time against Rachel Notley, who's running again for the NDP. I want to explain here a few different things that have happened here. So the rules of the debate were a little bit chaotic, but basically, as mentioned, it prioritized having people debate each other, that one-on-one debate. But the result of this is that it gave Danielle Smith a lot more time. It was the front-runner pile-on. All of the candidates virtually tried to devote their time asking questions to her, with the exception of maybe Brian Jean, which means they were trying to sink her. And whether they did sink her, it is tough to say. My colleague, William McBeath, is standing by. We'll get to him in just a moment. But first, I want to check in on the social media desk with Elie Cantin-Nantel. Obviously, we spoke at the beginning, Elie, about what people were thinking about who was going to win. Looking back on it, did people articulate a clear winner, or at least who they think the winner was?
Yes, there's actually quite a consensus in the the chat. People say it's Danielle Smith is number one, despite her being attacked constantly tonight. We heard a lot about Danielle Smith and the Sovereignty Act. People think she did a good job at fighting back. And Todd Loewen also is a popular one. And honestly, I'm not surprised. Well, he might not be known outside of Alberta very much. People have a lot of respect because he stood up to Jason Kenney as he was locking down the province. I remember that letter, that very strongly worded letter telling Kenney he should resign. Some people said Brian Jean, but there's mixed comments on Brian Jean. Somebody wrote, Jean is annoying me, no longer my second choice, it's Loewen. I found Jean kind of underperformed, especially at the beginning of the debate. I was wondering, where is Brian Jean? How come we're not hearing from him? I mean, this is somebody who kind of started the whole revolution against the revolt against Kenney in the Fort McMurray, Lake Labiche by election, and he seemed a little bit quiet for somebody who clearly wants to be premier. This is his third time trying to basically be premier.
Just to jump in on Brian Jean there, Elie, the thing that was interesting, so by the end of it, I mean, let's just look at the numbers. He had 2 of his little rebuttal paddly things left, which means that he was a lot more judicious and a lot more restrained about jumping in and getting into the debates at the beginning. And yeah, I would agree. For the first half, I kind of forgot he was in there, and he was affected by the dropout of the stream as well. So it was when he was speaking that one of the longer dropouts took place, which was when I jumped back in. He did speak a little bit more near the end. But one thing I would point out about Brian Jean's performance, I mean, he had, I'd say, the strongest or one of the strongest in terms of delivery. Like when he spoke, it sounded very natural. It sounded very authoritative. But it also, if you looked past the style, I don't know how much he was saying. So what were people specifically raising with Brian Jean that they weren't fans of?
Well, it appears that people were kind of, I guess, a bit unimpressed in total. I will say personally, on my personal observation, he came off again, as you said, he seemed to know what he wanted to do. when he said about the Sovereignty Act, he said, look, this is not, it came off as somebody who kind of knew his stuff a bit, but as I said, I asked my supporters, my followers, what they think of the Sovereignty Act. They all support it. And unfortunately, in politics, often it's not about the quality or the substance of an idea, but more about just the cover of the book and what something sounds like on the outside. And that's what people like. And again, the Alberta Sovereignty Act, given how Ottawa has been treated, is very popular.
Yeah, and one thing I would say, just looking back on the context, I know a lot of people were jumping up about the Sovereignty Act. The challenge that I would raise, just as far as strategy goes, is that whenever Travis Taves and Rajan Sani were criticizing it, they were saying it, they were repeating it, they were saying Sovereignty Act, Sovereignty Act, Sovereignty Act. And anytime you hear that, it's like, well, that actually sounds like a good thing. And it actually gives more name recognition for what is really Danielle Smith's flagship policy. Now, again, if the policy is unpopular, then maybe it's a good idea to keep tying it to her. But I think that people actually are going, I think it's going to backfire on them. Let's bring in William McBeath on this. Because, William, I know you've covered as an Albertan the Alberta independence discussion, and no one was coming out and saying we need separatism, but certainly Danielle Smith's Sovereignty Act is really directed at that growing movement of people that are dissatisfied with Ottawa, that want a more autonomous and a more sovereign Alberta. Do you think the blows on the Sovereignty Act landed?
To be honest, no. I think what's interesting about the Sovereignty Act, context of what the Kenney government had done previously on Trump's discontent, and they had a series of provincial town halls, this process, but I think a lot of people felt it didn't really result in anything. It didn't result in concrete measures being taken. There was no Alberta provincial pension plan. There was no force. There was a referendum on equalization, but the moment the referendum was over, heard about it again. So I think there's a pent-up concern that not enough was. The Act is a very politically visible response, quote, to what people are asking about.
Yeah, thank you very much, William. And I'll also say thank you as well for your contributions this evening. It's been very welcome. So we appreciate that very much. And of course, when we touch back on these issues at the next debate, we'll be sure to have you back on. So thanks again to my colleague, William McBeath here. I will say as well, I mean, we did a live show the night of the referendum. We did a live show because it was on the Calgary and Edmonton and other municipal elections as well. And the results, I don't think, were all that surprising. We knew that, 62% roughly of Albertans were probably going to support it. It was going to be around there. But I think William's point is right, that it is a big question mark of how you leverage that into something. And I'm curious if Western independence, Western separatism were things that you were seeing in the social media chatter, Elie.
I was seeing a bit of it. I was seeing a lot of Western alienation. Some people telling me, oh, Alberta's been left behind. Some people showing pessimism, being like, oh, it doesn't matter who wins, we will continue to be betrayed. And so there is a pessimism. And I saw this pessimism when I was in Alberta too. It's really because they've been through a lot of hard time and lots of governments that don't listen. So that's kind of what I've noticed there. I would say too, I think the crowd that maybe watches a UCP leadership debate are maybe not your Alberta separatists, they're more your more classical Alberta conservatives. So I think we're bound to not see as much discussions on separatism there, but there's definitely a lot of talk about sovereignty and independence and freedom. Freedom has been a very popular thing in Canada in the last few months. You wrote a book about the Freedom Convoy, Andrew, which by the way, you can get online. Just Indigo won't sell it. That's a shame, but right.
All right, you're getting invited back next time. Good job.
It's true. Like sovereignty, freedom, these things are intertwined, and I think again that is why the Alberta Sovereignty Act is so popular, because it's a form of independence, a form of freedom, without going full independence, which would be challenging given Alberta doesn't have any ocean or it doesn't have any ports to export its oil.
Yeah, one interesting thing, and this just sort of goes to the Danielle Smith question more broadly, is that she is not well liked. It sounds like, certainly not widely supported by a lot of the people in the UCP caucus. And I mentioned a few moments ago that whoever wins this leadership race is going to become the leader of caucus, have to lead that caucus through the next, I mean, it won't be the next 9 months, but the next several months, and then lead that caucus into an election. And the big question mark will be, for all they talk about unity, how much will the party and specifically the MLAs unify behind the next leader? Are they going to unify behind Danielle Smith? Are you going to have candidates that say, I don't want to run for the party anymore if Danielle Smith's the leader? So I think that's the big question. And again, I'm not talking about this as though it's a fait accompli, because there is a lot that still is going to happen. This is the first debate, but I bring it up just as we talk about the themes here that are coming up. So that's going to do it for us. I want to thank you, Elie Cantin-Nantel, for all your work this evening and with True North more broadly. It's been an absolute pleasure. So you have a good evening, sir, and we'll get you back on for the next one. And I want to thank you, the audience, for tuning into this live show. I know on one hand, it's always good when the technical glitches are not our fault, but I know to the audience, it's a moot point. So we thank you very much for your patience. We were just as frustrated as you were by it, but we're going to get things together for the next debate. Hopefully the UCP will buy a new modem by then. Maybe we can fundraise for it, but I will say, doing these shows, doing the coverage that we do, we have a reporter on the ground. She's in the ground. That's a whole other story, but she's on the ground in Medicine Hat. That is Rachel Emmanuel. And there's a lot of overhead to do the work that we do. We have to pay reporters and videographers and travel costs. So if you can chip in to do this journalism, to let us do this journalism, please do. You can head on over to donate.tnc.news, donate.tnc.news. If you're watching on YouTube, you can give us a little super chat there. But truly, thank you so much for your support, not just for tuning into tonight's show, but throughout the year. We are only able to do the work we do because of the generous support of people like you. And I know I'm sounding like a PBS commercial, but I do mean it. That does it for us for today, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great evening.